January 17th, 2023 meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. We'll start by asking our clerk to do a roll call.
Yes, Mayor Dropkin,
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Here.
Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
Commissioner Christensen,
Here.
Commissioner Tate.
Here. Thank you. Have commissioners had an opportunity to review the consent agenda, and does any commissioner wish to pull anything off the consent agenda or make a motion to accept it as presented?
I've seen the agenda. I have nothing to take off, so I'd move unless somebody else has an issue with it.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley and a second from Commissioner Tankersley to approve the consent agenda as presented. And have all commissioners had an opportunity to review accounts payable and purchasing reports, including the new, what's that? Oh, gosh, the vote parting. Yes, let's do that. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And all those opposed say nay. The consent agenda is is unanimously accepted. Have all commissioners had an opportunity to review the accounts payable and purchasing reports, including the new formatting? And does anyone have any questions on that?
No, I've seen it. I'm fine.
No question.
No questions.
Wonderful. Next, we're going to welcome Forester Brent Keller to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the 2022 stumpage sales are all wrapped up. Of course, sales are complete, including project work, and prepared for planting. Reforestation will occur the next few months, weather permitting, of course. 2023 stumpage sales are all set to go. They're laid out on the ground, and prospectuses were emailed out to prospective buyers today. The bid opening this year a little earlier on February 8th. The two sales comprise roughly 125 acres and about 5 million feet. And it's important to note that both sales are expanded a little bit, will include a little more volume than we anticipated due to that pretty serious wind event we had out there the week after Christmas. And so a lot of blowdown around the watershed in spots, particularly that 303 road unit was hit really hard. So this is a good fit for harvesting it this year. And so it affected the size of these units somewhat. And then the 187 road wasn't hit as hard in the unit, but there are some areas adjacent to it that will pick up some volume there. So both units will include a little extra volume this year due to the recent windstorm. Any questions?
No question.
No questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have an appearance request from MGP Engineering. Would anyone like to declare a conflict of interest?
I will declare a conflict as my role on MEDP board.
Thank you. And I think we're going to invite up Patty Herzogmeyer with MEDP to present. Yes.
Or to at least
Or introduce.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. I'd like to introduce the team from MGP Engineering. MEDP has been working with this company since June, July of 2022, and we're very excited to bring them to the Commission to hear their presentation and their company. I'd like to introduce Jason Goldberg and Brian McGarvey and Linda Goldberg from MGP Engineering for their presentation.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Do we have chairs for everyone or?
I think we've got one more. I don't know what I'll do is I can sit at the chair and I can do most of the presentation, and then I might every once in a while just lean over my shoulder and say help.
Okay.
If you guys have any hard questions, if you want to ask any, please feel free. So I'll introduce myself again. My name is Jason Goldberg. I'm the CEO of MGP Engineering LLC. We are a new start microelectronics component manufacturing company that is trying to establish a microelectronics component manufacturing facility, an organization that includes production, it includes research and development, as well as training through a combination of relationships and in-house training to make pieces and parts that go into pretty much everything electronic that we use. Specifically known as passive components. And I'll every once in a while, Brian is our chief technology officer. I'll lean over to him every once in a while to make sure I'm not crossing any boundaries, because I realize that this is an open discussion. So I want to make sure I don't cross anything proprietary for specifically what it is that we're going to go achieve or what it is that we're targeting to do. But the reason that we're presenting to you all tonight is because we're interested in your lot that's across the street as the location, as one potential candidate location where we'd like to set up our first operation. And we did provide some slides and some read aheads. I don't know if that's available for us to kind of walk through. If you'd like me to just go ahead and walk through what that is.
He's gonna bring it up here. Diane, if you're ready.
Okay. So kind of as I mentioned in my oral introduction, we are making microelectronic parts and components that go into pretty much every circuit, passive microelectronic components. So our neighbors up in Hillsborough have Intel headquarters up there. They make microchips. Microchips are great for processing lots of information, but they do so by flowing electricity in and out of them, and lots of tiny little transistors turn off and on. Well, in order for that electricity to flow in, you have to control the flow of that electricity, and that's what you use passive microelectronic components for. Same way you do here at MW&L to transmit electricity for consumption, and and kind of upstream them a little bit through production, right? So it just works at a much smaller scale. None of the devices that we're using at the moment to communicate or to illuminate this room would work without the components that we are talking about producing. So if you don't have any other slides on this one, I'll ask that we progress to the next slide. Some attributes include that we're veteran and woman-owned. Total experience for everybody on the ownership team is over 50 years combined experience in program management, technology maturation, marketing, business development, as well as custom product solutions, and leading complex teams. And we expect this to be leading complex teams. Sir,
excuse me, you don't mind if we interrupt? Because
please do. This is a two-way.
How many people are on that team?
It's a good question. 7?
I think we have 7 right now.
7 at the moment. That's our ownership team.
Okay, thank you.
7 members. So next slide. Our mission, vision, and values. We're not just out to make a buck. We're out to actually make an impact. And specifically, realizing the vision. And I'll get to this in the next slide. The method by which we are going to accomplish this from a funding standpoint is that we're pursuing grant funding from the federal government under what's known the CHIPS and Science Act that was signed by the president back in the summer. Basically, we are going to try to repatriate production of components that have been offshored over 20 years ago, and the ability and capacity to produce these components in the United States does not presently exist, and it has not existed for a very long time. And as a function of some of our backgrounds that you saw in the previous slide, we are aware of the need to be able to produce these components to make them available for advanced applications like tablet computers, as well as more mundane applications such as power controllers, inverters, and other things that are germane more to national strategic interests in the Department of Defense, as well as the intelligence community, as well as critical infrastructure. That's what we're going after, but we want to do it in a sustainable way so that we can provide good living wages for our employers, for our employees, and make sure that we're good stewards not only of the taxpayer dollars, but also of the community that we're working in, and that we're good neighbors.
Is this your first startup?
Actually, no, not mine. I don't know how many we have between us. How many do you have?
I think I have. I know I have. I am currently in one, had another one. I help sponsor a third.
In the similar industry?
Mine is totally different.
Okay,
Um,
that's all good.
Mine is not in manufacturing, but I've done a lot of small unit manufacturing over the years.
Thank you.
And what are your employee projections?
So we're projecting, there's a little bit of it depends there on the total number of full demand at our full operations. What we're looking at right now, our model shows about 88 people, including the leadership team. So we're looking at establishing 2 parallel production lines that will be running 2 shifts. And that tells us that puts about 54 to 58 people on the floor total, that not per shift, but total shift people plus overhead administrative support, plus the research and development, which is another side. So the research and development team will be about 8 to 10 people. Everybody else will be production, and we'll be cycling some of the research and development people in and out of the main production line. If we encounter a significant demand signal, we are structuring the business to be scalable on a relatively rapid basis, and that's really just a function of how we're designing our manufacturing line. And each manufacturing line is looking at about 25 to 30 people. Okay, next slide. So some of this I already kind of mentioned. You may notice if you read in the news about a week and a half ago that Dell has decided to stop buying microelectronic components and specifically microchips from overseas, in full knowledge of the fact that they are not going to have much of a supply basis available to them from the United States, or at least countries that we consider to be trustworthy, that are not China or accessible to China for potential influence and interference in the near future. That's kind of a direct outcome of the Chips and Science Act. So they know that there is a bow wave coming, a wave of new starts and or retooling coming throughout the microelectronic and computer industries for producing these parts and components. A portion of the CHIPS Act is carved out aside for new starts like us. And we are anxious to get our footing under us and get ourselves started so we can go after the first portion of funding that's going to be available, and that must be obligated within this government fiscal year, federal government fiscal year. Question, sir?
So help us understand the funding cycle. So you said the first part.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if you don't get that, then it's over. But if you do get that,
Maybe.
So yes and no.
Okay.
No, yes and no. So there's a couple ways to go at it. So I'd like to approach, my answer to your question more from what we're trying to accomplish as opposed to contingencies if we don't. So we are going after approximately, pardon me for being bad at math in public, a little bit more than $26 billion that has to be obligated by the federal government by September 30th.
is that the total, or is that what you're going after?
No, that's the total of what's
Okay.
available. We're going after something that's a little bit less. So our total, what we need from everybody in the form of actual real financing, as well as something that can be quantitatively defined, which is one of the things that we want to talk about in establishing a potential lease arrangement or potential sale arrangement, depending on what you and the board think is in the best interest of McMinnville Water and Light. It has to be something quantifiable, and a quantifiable stake that once we get up to that point, we're going to be looking for a little bit less than $200 million. So we're talking about making a capital improvement on where we put our first site is going to consist of 3 buildings. They're going to total about 140,000 square feet. Our current estimate is that improvements, and I'm including a safety factor here of a couple of percent, not quite 10%. I'm projecting it to cost about $90 million worth of total improvements. That's for the 3 buildings, plus our first line of equipment and some of the basic improvements on the outside, parking lots, office equipment, things like that.
So the CHIPS Act funding for starts is supposed to be allocated by September 30th of 23?
The first half of the new starts that need to be measurably secure so that they can be trustworthy for providing parts and components for critical technologies that are new, innovative technologies, as well as legacy technologies, such as, I'll say
capacitors, resistors.
Right,
Like in the power industry, you're already running into this.
yeah,
Your passive devices do not come from the US.
right.
How long is your lead time?
Let's not.
Talked about that.
The semiconductor,
Got it.
the microelectronics manufacturing
Hmm,
has the exact same problem. Their parts are smaller,
Right. It
but
all
they use
fits
more
into
of
the
them.
bigger unit. So I'm making some assumptions here.
Mhm.
My assumption is that you've already applied for this first tranche of money.
No, we
When
haven't.
does that application process start?
That application process starts when the grant window opens at the end of February. We need to achieve eligibility in order to apply because of the way that the CHIPS Act was written. The CHIPS Act was written in such a way that we need to have codified, like some type of formal relationship ranging all the way from the locality through the state to the federal level. We are in pursuit of private equity investment and or loans, but we're in the middle of the spot right now where we need to have good relationships with public entities at the state and lower level in order to be eligible for funds from the relatively small pool of potential investors and or financial institutions that can give us loans, because we are going to be supplying the defense and intelligence sectors. We cannot receive funds or commingle funds from any form of foreign influence. So if there is a private investor or a publicly traded bank that has money that comes from a foreign source, they do not have a way that they can account for the difference between money that is commingled from a foreign source and a domestic source. And therefore, they are not eligible to loan us money or to invest in us. So as
validate all of those components to be able to apply for this first tranche.
in addition to the fact that the only way that it is turning out, and as the requirements that are being stipulated by the Department of Commerce, who is going to hand out this first tranche of 26.2 to $6 billion. They have a couple of other requirements that basically are necessitating that a significant demonstrative stake that is quantifiable come from the local and state level in order for us to be eligible to apply. That's our eligibility criteria. So we can submit an application and say, hey, look at how great our technical approach is, and look at how great our business plan is. If we do not have a stake from the localities where we want to go, they will put us in the not compliant pile immediately.
And by stake, does that look like money?
It could look like money, or it could look like something that is quantifiable. So it could be favorable lease agreements, favorable land access agreements. It could look like favorable utility relationships, things like that. It's something that has to be something that we can go forward and quantify and say, okay, this is the going rate for this product, service, or access availability, whatever this term is. Here's the going rate. Here's the good deal that we got that is worth X amount of money, and therefore it takes our total ask down by this amount. All right. I know that how much money that we were actually going to be asking for if we were to just walk off the street, go up to Wall Street and say, hey, here's how much money I need to stand up this operation and be solvent for 5 years. So that total amount of money I mentioned earlier is a combination of capital investment and keeping everybody running while we stand up, acquire our equipment, train everybody, and are fully operational for a 5-year time span, which is required by the law, before we need to be completely financially independent.
That's your 200 million.
That's our 200 million. We have modeled that depending on what we do and how quickly we get stuff, we'll be in the black closer to 2 years. But I don't want to promise that, because anything could happen. Our lead time for our initial manufacturing equipment alone is about 9 to 12 months.
So just to make sure that I caught all these components, your overall ask through CHIPS Act is for 200 million, but you're asking for 90 million up front for capital improvements and for operations and research and development?
No, 90 million is what it's going to cost for us to build the buildings. That's what the buildings and the improvement to the lot is going to cost.
And that's part of your 200,000.
That's part of the 200 million. Yes. No,
Okay.
we have more than that. There's a lot that I didn't include in this because I'm going to stray into proprietary territory, and that's why I've kind of constrained that. But we can share the in a proprietary sense for the sake of not exposing some of our gems from a business standpoint.
Okay, and then you need a quantifiable stake from localities. So that says to me that something like an MOU is not really sufficient
No.
because there's nothing quantifiable.
That's right. It has to be quantifiable in a way. So here is the lease agreement for you to have access to this lot. And this lease agreement looks like this, and it is it's not something that I can turn around to a bank and sell, but it's something that I can quantify, and I can say it is worth this much, and therefore my cost, I can reprogram the resources that I would have allocated towards the lease to something else.
And your deadline's the 17th of February, sorry.
That's
for
what I'd like to
application.
get to. Yeah, that's,
And you're working on a workforce development play on this, I imagine.
there absolutely is a workforce development play. And actually, we already have an established relationship with Chemeketa Community College, specifically the Salem campus, and we've established some relationships with OIT and Linfield. We have a long-term plan, and the federal government is actually going to pay for most of that through scholarships from us. So I'll use Chemeketa as kind of the prime example, mostly because they have exactly what we need. The only thing that they lack is sufficient number of professors, which we're talking to the state legislature about at the moment. But the way that what the CHIPS Act has in a carve out and a slightly different section that we will leverage is basically the equivalent of scholarships. So up to $60,000 a year per student for 2 years to go to community college to get certified. And the only ask is or requirement is that they have to work for us for a couple of probably 2 years after that in order to actually pay the value of that back. But those scholarships will flow directly through us to Chemeketa on behalf of potential employees.
What certification does Chemeketa have to have, or what is the certificate that you're hoping to achieve with this program?
It already exists. Their electronics technician program
Okay,
is
so
what
it's
we need. Their electronics technician and manufacturing pipeline. We've having talked to the chairs of that particular program about the only other thing that we would do is provide them with exemplar equipment that we want their students to be able to actually work on. And that will be probably a relationship that we establish, that we morph with them over time, because some of that equipment's pretty big. And so rather than shipping it to them, we would rather just have their students drive to us and work on and learn to work on the actual equipment. But their program is almost turnkey.
So the equipment you mentioned, it's a 9 to 12 month. Is this all state-based manufacturing of this equipment, or is it overseas?
Not yet. Right now, it's made in Slovakia.
It's
Yeah.
made in Eastern Europe right now.
Yikes.
So would you be better off trying to find an existing building and not worry about the time it takes to get a building built?
So so for part of our business plan, that is an option. If we could get into an existing building to put our research and development, what we would do is put one research and development production line with I will call it affectionately a mad science shop, where we can refine our processes while the main facilities are being built. I would say the answer to that question is yes. I am concerned about the security of of existing facilities if they are going to be considered measurably secure. Measurably secure, if you look it up in the dictionary, you will not find a definition. But it is going to be something similar to the handling of nuclear material as you are making either power rods or weapons.
Is that for the product, or is that for the possibility of the
That's for the product.
Department of Defense contract?
That's the requirement for the CHIPS Act. So what they're looking for is, we also have all this national security infrastructure things that we buy from everywhere. They have no control over the supply chain. Right.
So it's
So
secure.
think of it like counterfeits in
Got it.
it, right?
Yep.
So they want full control over that supply chain. So they know that when they get a part, they know where it came from, they know how it was manufactured, and then they can come back to us and go, hey, we had parts in this lot go bad. What's going on? We
Got
can
it.
reach back and go, oh, here's some samples. What was it like?
Yeah.
And that methodology that I described is basically a multiple points of redundancy audit trail that you maintain records of, so that you can follow exactly what happened with any particular part or component. But instead of it just applying to uranium and plutonium custody, it's also going to be custody of all of, going from raw material, which is what our business is going from raw material to parts and components on reels that then get shipped out to our customers.
Okay.
Sure.
So you mentioned state and local funding in a material and measurable way. Is local required, or would state be enough?
Based on the exemplars we've seen in other states, it's both. I think that our experience in trying to set things up in Oregon indicates that I think the more local we get, the better off we are going to be. We are observing, I would say, incubator type development occurring in plain states that goes down to the town level, expands to the county level, and then has backing from the state level to make up for anything for other things that exist as a function of existing programs and new programs they're standing up.
And as you look at this, do you think some of that contribution of value needs to come from water and light?
Yeah, because you have a lot where we want to set up shop.
So you're not interested unless you get either a significantly below market lease or a price below market?
I think that I wouldn't necessarily put it that way. Are we interested in other lots in McMinnville other than the one that you have? The answer to that question is yes. I think that what I am looking to do is try to take as much of a accountable chunk from a monetizable standpoint. I am trying to chip away at that $200 million price tag in any way that I can figure out how. Without necessarily being just cash in the bank. We need to get cash in the bank, and I'm not asking McMinnville Water and Light for that. What I'm asking McMinnville Water and Light for is other favorable conditions in such a way that I can go get less cash in the bank that I need in order to demonstrate to the Commerce Department that we're ready to break ground on the day that they call us up and say, congratulations, you win. You also happen to have a very, very interesting combination of geographic features that are very favorable to the type of business that we want to establish. And specifically, and again, I'll maybe stealing a little bit of Brian's thunder here, the lot that we are most interested in happens to be across the street from a substation, which makes it very easy for us to scale quickly. And substation that currently isn't, to our understanding, is not maxed out. And if its capacity is not maxed out, it gives us the ability to account for a percentage of the load on that particular substation, set up our operations, and have room to grow in the neighborhood where McMinnville would like its light industrial activity to grow anyway. We're looking at other lots in the area, and you're interested in other lots in the area. We just think the lot that you have happens to be the one that is the most compelling.
So are you only looking in McMinnville?
No,
Are you only looking in Oregon?
no.
And so you must be, I mean, February is pretty right around the corner. So do you consider that you're maybe much further along with some other locations than this location?
No, we were most further along with this one.
Interesting.
What's the percentage of the 200 million that you would like to show as favorable?
Well, I might have to, let me answer that question a slightly different way, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if I am presenting to the federal government that the total amount of funding and in-kind quantifiable stake that we can get from all portions of the spectrum, from local all the way up to the federal level, to include private loans and or equity, is $200 million. I am going to try to get as close to 100 million as I can from non-federal sources. And that's because I know for a fact that I can get it from Kansas.
Yeah, but what about of that 100 million? You didn't really answer the question about how much of that do you think is going to be private and how much do you think is going to be public donation?
So that part I don't know the answer to yet. That I've had a really hard time. That's been a little bit of a circular discussion saying if they come to the table, we will be too. That's a frustration I've had with this, with the private equity and the private loan side. If I don't have a partnership with the state and the locality, they won't even talk to us. And that's a problem that we've had because of the way that they are structuring themselves.
So how is Business Oregon engaged with you?
We've been communicating with them, and they've been directing us to a couple of different programs, the SIP program. There's a couple of small loan guarantee programs. We've been trying to bang on the door of the new governor to get access to potentially governor discretionary funds. All of those are small dribs and drabs that we're hoping to get us over a certain metric. If I were to shoot from the hip and say, I'd say probably in that $25 to $50 million range from below the actual state legislature level. And then after that, some kind of a combination of loan guarantees. There's also a separate tax credit program that we're engaging in some eligible financial institutions to go after. The new market tax credit program is one specifically that we're targeting that we know for a fact will get us pretty close to the startup funds we need just to kick off operations prior to receiving federal grant funding under the act. All of those, I believe, will add up to somewhere in that 25 to 50% range of the total $200 million price tag. I am going to aim for 50%, knowing that I'm probably not going to get it outside of other states that we are observing are providing that level of funding to other entities that are pursuing funds under the act. They are not competitors with us because it's a big ecosystem. But that's what we're kind of aiming for, because those other states are standard bearers from the perspective of the Commerce Department. What I care about doing for MGP engineering is making sure that we get above the threshold that has yet to be defined by the Commerce Department to be eligible to receive funds. And as a rough wag, looking at it from a business owner, I'd have to say it's at least 25%.
So why not look at one of these states that is already guaranteeing that.
Some of that's selfish and some of it's strategic. You don't put all your eggs in one basket and they're all going to the same couple of areas. That's number one. Two, because a couple of us already live here in Oregon. And three, because we know that there's a couple of, like, as I mentioned before, the geographic features that I don't really want to enumerate make McMinnville a fortress. And this town is very, very compelling because of its location, because of its resources that keep the light and the power and keep the water and the light flowing, so to speak, as well as its proximity to Portland, Hillsborough, Salem, and a couple of other areas. You have the ability to pull on an existing workforce that it may or may not already exist in the local community. If not, we know there are people nearby who we will be able to draw from and we will be able to grow from. And we know that we will be able to get our raw materials here very, very quickly as a function of the existing transportation infrastructure. And we know that our finished product can go anywhere in the world because that's a really, really big runway that you don't need anymore. For at least it doesn't need to be as long as it is, because I'm also a former aviator. So I look at it wistfully every time I go by. We're not going to be flying 747s in and out of here. We don't need to, but it gives us very significant geographic access in a very short period of time without having a lot of other traffic that we have to compete with. And we find that to be incredibly compelling.
So what is your timeline for the favorable contribution? If it opens in February?
As soon as possible.
So
Right, so one thing I think we missed it, you can make the favorable, the contingent.
yeah, that would be.
Right, so.
Yeah, we can-
Obvious,
It's not
right?
like
Yeah.
you have to give it to us now, you can say, these are the terms. If everything goes well.
Yeah.
Right, it just has to be
Right.
measured.
Okay.
So there's an elephant in the room that you haven't been introduced to, I think.
Mhm.
And we'll have to consult with our lawyer about this, but my understanding from a lot of years on the commission is that we cannot give you a favorable lease or sell you property at a favorable rate unless it somehow benefits us. In other words, if you had property we needed for a transmission line, we could achieve a favorable lease or something on that, but we can't. I don't think we're allowed to do the things you're talking. You seem to be thinking we can.
So that's an interesting statement. I'm glad you clarified that. I think that is something that we can probably work out as a function of the types of things that we're making. And again, Brian has done an excellent job articulating exactly what we're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And we're making pottery and screening and screen printing. And the pottery consists of ceramics that have an application primarily in the microelectronic space. But it's still useful at a utility scale, depending on what the utility needs to use it for, and specifically how big they are. We have to be careful about making sure that our ask from the federal government falls within the scope of the CHIPS Act. But if you can use it, we can make it, and we can sell it to you for a discount and exchange once we start making it. That is totally within this, and that's one of the things that we realized when we started talking to McMinnville Water and Light. That is a gaping hole in the CHIPS Act, is that it's not talking about critical infrastructure from a operations and sustainment standpoint. And we realized pretty quickly that is a business area that we fully intend to look into. And again, that's one of the reasons that we're looking at multiple sites in McMinnville specifically for that purpose, because a production line that makes something at microelectronic scale is fundamentally different from a physical standpoint than one that makes something at utility scale. But from a business planning standpoint, utility scale is on our roadmap. It's just a question of when we can get what resources we can legally apply to building that line out. And that's something that is on our roadmap.
The money that you would be seeking prescribes what you're making based
Correct.
on the needs of the government.
Correct.
And over time, you'll be applying that technology to new consumer needs.
Correct.
Where
Customer
utility-
needs, I would say. Yes.
And so a customer could down the road benefit from this startup investment. right?
Absolutely.
I think
Because-
the realistically, I think Power and Light the long term, if you're taking a long term view, I think there will be a long term investment, return on investment based on your ability to get certain parts in your supply chain domestic.
Can you go back to the workforce development and the $60,000 scholarships? Is that $60,000 a year annually that you're giving out overall for everybody that might be going
So that
through
is-
the program at Chemeketa?
That is built, it's built into the act. It doesn't, as long as they go to a program that meets the requirements under the law, that money would flow through from the federal government through us to somebody who attends a two-year community college for the purposes of working for us on that line.
So $60,000 per person?
Per person per year.
Per person per year. And do you know the cost of the program at Chemeketa, for instance?
I think
for
they're at
somebody
like
to go
102 or 110.
through Per
I think.
year?
No, I think that's 2 years.
So that you're saying then that
They
the
get to go
2
to
years
school free, basically.
is completely offset?
Yeah, That's
Okay,
the goal.
and back on the February 17th, you said, when I asked you the last time, you said that was your goal for application. What's the application deadline?
There isn't one. The application deadline, and the reason why is because this is when because it's a grant window with several $100 billion behind it. We are going after a segment of that several $100 billion that is set aside for new starts that are measurably secure. So we're going after a subsection of it. When you look up the CHIPS Act later on and as part of the diligence to check on us, you'll see several different portions of the act. We're going after the portion of the act that is focused specifically specifically to defense and intelligence applications that require a certain level of additional rigor in the way the manufacturing process works. Half of that money has to be obligated by the federal government by the end of the government fiscal year on September 30th. And I am backing that up because I have some experience in government acquisition, understanding how long it realistically takes for somebody to look at our proposal, read it, validate it, choose us, and then get that money to us in the bank. That's about a 4 to 5 month process. Knowing that the first window for that $26 billion opens up sometime in the end of February, it is in our strategic interest as an entity to have all of our ducks in a row before that window opens, because I know for a fact that the format is not going to look the same as what our draft looks like. So we're going to have to take some time. I would rather spend our time updating the format so that it looks the way the Commerce Department wants it to look than to be scrambling to find something that we don't necessarily have in place yet, which is an agreement that meets the requirement for eligibility, because the eligibility requirements are very clearly stated in the law. And if we cannot submit our application until we meet the eligibility requirements. But we need to be able to submit our application early enough to be part of the first group of winners.
So it's a rolling process.
It is a rolling process, yes.
They'll keep funding things until they run out of money.
Correct.
The deadline is September 23.
The deadline of getting the money
Out.
out is September 23. It's going to take them a few months to do review selection, and then it takes a couple other months to send the money in the bank. That's about a 4 month process. And we want to get in the front of that line.
Okay. Or a box on the checklist.
Yeah.
Got it.
Very important one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I realize we really only stopped at the background slide. There's about 7 or 8 more of those slides. I don't know if we want to go through them and clarify any additional questions. I'm happy to, but I recognize that you have a lot of other things on the agenda.
Do commissioners have any additional questions at this time?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think it's more than a question. I'm very impressed with your presentation. I like your concept. I think it's exciting. I am very concerned that we not rely on us for a very big number on that contribution. And the reason I say that is, and again, I may be wrong about how what our rules are, but if I think about, the net present value of I'm just going to make a number of a lease reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And you want that to be a big number. And if that's a big number, I'm having a hard time imagining what we could say with a straight face to get a net present value of a discount on transformers. I just made that up, but something or things like that we don't even know you're ever going to be able to produce.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want us to be, and I'm only one vote.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't talked to our lawyers about it, but I have talked to previous lawyers about similar kind of asks. not like this, but similar ideas. So I would encourage you strongly to, work on entities that don't have the restrictions we have. The city, the county, and the state, obviously.
Mhm.
And try to get most of your money there, because I don't think you're gonna get a number from us that will be very helpful.
Any number that we get from you is help. And I'm in violent agreement with your comment, because that is something that we recognize. We recognize that this is a public utility, and that you have limited resources and there is only so much that you can work with. I see our relationship with MW&L Water and Light as a piece of our cornerstone to get ourselves established. When we go to Salem and communicate with members of the legislature and both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they say, well, who are you working with and how are you doing this? And how did you figure this out? And how are you figuring it out? Because right now, nobody knows, because this is new. I want to be able to answer the question in a quantifiable way and say, okay, well, I've got this piece of stake here and they're a public entity that is committed to, to providing a stake, and I'm able to quantify this stake. But this stake is not going to be enough. This is the help they need from you. And this is how they need your help. And it may not necessarily be directly from, them, it's not necessarily you that they are necessarily helping, but by helping us, they add veracity to the overall package that we're capable of getting, because then we can turn to the city government and we can turn to the county government and say, these are things that the local community has decided that it wants to demonstrate a stake in some form of quantifiable way. Therefore, it's in your best interest to follow suit because they've decided to take a pole position as a leader, as a member of the public community.
What I'm trying to say is that in the past, we have worked hard with local industries to make it work for them here. The creamery, when it just burned down, the steel mill over the years. But we haven't really done something where we say, we're giving you this much money or this much value as a stake in your business. We can't, it's always been my understanding we can't do that. So I'm thinking we can be more helpful to you other ways.
Okay. We are open to your feedback and your ideas.
Right.
There's definitely no monopoly on good ideas on our side.
John, I know you declared this conflict, but I think that there's no conflict in you answering this question. The site details, site power and utility needs, call out 6 megawatts. You mentioned the room at the substation. What is the capacity like and how is that impacted?
So we would come out of our East McMinnville substation. So we've got 2 transformers there. Both of them are 20 MVA. One is, I think, loaded at about 14 and the other's at 6. So we're about half of our actual capacity that we would limit it to.
We're at half currently, and this would put another 25% on top.
Half of the total there. So we tend to limit our substations to the nameplate of the transformers. So we would have about 20 of essentially 40 is what we have right now. 40 megawatts MVA of capacity.
Gross volume on 6 megawatts of power annually.
What's that?
Gross volume dollar wise. What would the electric bill be?
Jane, do you remember what's
Projection?
air gas? Well, they were about 5.
So this would put us in tier 2, so it's gonna be a whole.
Yeah.
5-6 million.
Conversation.
Oh yeah. More, probably more than that.
Say the
Under
number
10
again.
now.
Yeah, we'd have to
$63 a minute.
we'd have to look at the total. And it also depends on how they're loaded too. Is it consistent or is it?
And this is probably at full capacity
Yeah.
when you're fully running.
So another question for you, since you have a conflict, but you said on a committee, is what's industrial ground going for an acre? $5-6 a square foot?
What do yeah.
Or James could probably use it.
No, that's about right.
So the value of 15 acres is something around $3 million then. So not a very big chunk of money. Okay.
And can you expand on tier 2? Or can you expand on tier 2?
Currently, we have an allocation of the federal system from BPA hydro system that's considered tier 1 power. a load of 6 megawatts would put us above our tier 1 cap. Into a tier 2 product, which is a market purchase. Comes at a higher rate.
So all of our electricity would come to us at a higher rate?
No,
Just
It's
anything,
above our-
Just
Just
anything
above
over.
the purchaser.
And just, so you know, the furnaces tend to run all the time. So they're a pretty consistent load. Because taking the furnaces up and down in temperature,
right?
it's wasteful in energy and it causes problems in the furnaces.
Okay,
Can I answer anything else?
well, like it's been all day, all.
Where are you currently headquartered right now, or are you still in the formative stage?
We're still in the formative stage. There's 2 of us who live here in Oregon. There's a couple others that are spread throughout Utah and the National Capital Region, but the intent is to set up work headquarters wherever our first site is.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. I very much, we very much appreciate the time and we're available for follow-ups. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We're committed to succeeding on behalf of the local community, the state and the nation.
Great, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And then I mean, the next step would be to say, are we want to bring that back at our next commission meeting for any continued discussion and potential evaluation of your concerns?
Yeah, I would like to. talk
You
about
bring it
that.
back, sure.
And then
So the timing,
staff could talk to them in the meantime about more detail about what they want.
well, and I'm concerned about the timing.
Right.
So knowing that February timeframe is lingering, they're making some decisions and business.
Right, and you're gonna
decisions.
want, I mean, you're asking, I know Commissioner Tankersley is raising issues about the authority of the commission to give away money, for lack of a better description of it. And I would just tell you that is a potential issue. I mean, it's a real issue, it's not a potential issue. That as we always talked about before, Waterlight has a limited role, and your role is to provide electricity and water. And so you're not an economic development commission.
And that relates to the asset of property.
It relates to all your assets. It relates to your operations, your funds, you derive your rates out of, from cost of service analysis is based on cost of providing electricity and water. I think we're going to see a contract for your rate analysis for cost of service for electricity this evening. So we are required, the commission is required to estimate expenses for providing electricity and estimating expenses providing water annually and base your rates on those costs.
Yes, I understand.
Are you saying that and let me ask this both ways to make sure I'm capturing what you're saying, that the role of the commission should be to set policy around water and electric rates? Or are you saying that you feel like this is outside of the role of the organization? And if that's so, how do we even have the land available for lease?
Well, I think the land available for lease. I mean, at some point, all assets of the commission or assets of the commission are for the water and electric system. So, whatever land we have theoretically was purchased as an asset of either the water system or the electric system. That's the kind of
Do
by
we know
definition.
What the purpose of purchasing the property was? What was the intent of the commission at the time?
It wasn't here in 1994. It was purchased in 1994. So I mean, that would.
So speaking from another place I used to work, right?
Yes.
That was always a piece of property that was defined as an opportunity site, if you
But
will.
who defined it? It wasn't the board that defined it.
When I
The board was land banked that historically for future growth and operations.
and is
Future
that
substations.
continue to be the,
Depends on what happens, 50 years from now. So we never, ever accepted any offers and discouraged anybody.
well, I know you never put a sign up, but there were
A lot of people made lots of
conversations.
efforts, but it's been turned down.
So I guess that's the policy discussion, right? Is that, does the board want to continue to have a conversation about this site? My thought was, we've been sort of noodling this for a while. I didn't know that we weren't going to be interested in having a conversation. I think that that's a difficult place for us to sort of, now we're saying that, but is that
If you go back to the records, you'll see that there's been a certain amount of disagreement.
Oh, I may have been a part of
You
that.
certainly were part of it, if you remember.
Yes, I do.
And so I may be the lone wolf on this, but that was bought strategically to protect us for the future. At one time, we wanted to make sure there was no housing put in around us and stuff.
I think it was a protective measure. It wasn't necessarily that we're going to grow the facility that direction. I think it was.
Initially, it started out to be protected because there was issues with migrant housing that was going to be put in the area and stuff. And we're known for doing 25 and 50-year projections and stuff. And so once we give that land away, it's gone. And we're right now, I mean, I can see us in 20 years. I mean, we're outgrowing this building already as it is. Our yard's getting tight. I mean, in my mind, that was always, and you also heard me say that at some point, maybe the city, this would be a wonderful facility, this end of town, the city headquarters and the recreational facility and all that. I mean, great complex. I talked about that once too.
So I was also here in 1994, as I recall. I think.
Let's see, I was
And my recollection, although vague, is that the land became available. We didn't really know what we would need exactly. It made sense to have a buffer, and it made sense to have room to expand in that direction if we needed to. You are not the only one that's disagreed with Commissioner Gormley over the years. The essential question, and Sam can correct me, is whether we need this for water and light purposes or whether it's surplus and we would get rid of it. And I think we can be careful how it's disposed of and who it's disposed of, so it doesn't adversely impact us and so as the benefit of the community.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we're talking about now, but I don't think that even if we were to decide it's surplus, that we could then, for economic development purposes or for the purposes of benefiting a company that we all thought was worthwhile for the community and the country. I don't think that from what Sam, I just heard him say, and what Dave Hockenberg told us, beat into our heads for years, actually. I don't think that we can sell it at a discount or lease it at a discount unless there's a countervailing value somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to spend time talking about that here. I
Right.
think ultimately, does the commission, how do we move forward on the discussion if that property is a viable piece of property for this company to keep pursuing?
So I think what we need to do is bring back essentially a staff report to the next commission meeting. I don't think that this would warrant having an emergency meeting. I understand that there's a time frame on the applicant, but this isn't an emergency of McMinnville Water and Light. So that would feel extraordinary, given that we're already set to meet. But having a staff report that comes back, that flushes out the history of that land a little bit, talks about opportunities that have been looked at and some policy decision. And of course, the in-house legal analysis I guess that's the first step, is the in-house legal analysis, because once we're going back, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing that they're proposing that they think they can supply the countervailing value, to use your words, and that would come back. I don't know if it would be appropriate with or without a staff recommendation, but definitely with, obviously a legal opinion, yes. And then I don't know if that would be appropriate to have a staff recommendation on the use of the land, but certainly to better understand for the rest of the commission, and then the commission needs to discuss it, understanding the historic intent more fully, and also understanding that is then the decision of this commission.
There's also the issue, they said they're looking at a piece of property. So, I mean, we're just in a speculative situation right now, too. That's the other thing that we shouldn't get involved.
And I appreciate that. And I think you're right, Mayor. I think that's the right way to go. But I think we should be agnostic on who gets the property. At first, we need to determine what we want as a commission to happen to that property. If it's off the market, then let's be honest about it. If it's in play, then let's figure out what that means. And I also, at some point, if it says, hey, maybe we can think a little bit differently, and the commission is favorable to marketing that property. I think that ship's kind of sailed, but right. What are the best practices, or what are the past opportunities that we've worked with businesses on? So I know when a station had to go into not a station, an upgrade to a fiber, right? There was a amicable partnership that was Water and Light and McMinnville Industrial Promotions and the city came together, and they created a partnership to draw in dark fiber. And that was probably previous to your time.
The industrial park, yeah.
In the industrial park, when we needed to upgrade some at an industrial partner, they needed to upgrade their electrical
Water system.
and they couldn't afford the big, tackle the cost up front. There was a payment plan put in place.
That was renting transformers, I believe.
Yeah, so I think we have some history in being amicable to businesses. I don't think I'm uncomfortable with anything that sort of gives away money, right? But I also think we can be, we have tools that we can use that are more friendly, particularly to a startup that doesn't have a lot of operating cash up front. I think it's good practice to have that toolkit at our hands when our general manager is talking to someone, say, here's some things that we've done in the past. I can't make any promises, but this is how we can do it. But I think at the end of the day, is the property on the market?
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with your point that the staff report, the information on the property should be agnostic to any potential purchaser, lessor, et cetera. It's very focused on the viability of how we move forward with our assets.
And can I just ask, beyond that, if we determine that the property was not on the market, let's say, and they're looking at other property in McMinnville, does Water and Light still have a possible partnership or relationship with them from the Water and Light perspective from electric and water, and is there some relationship of value, to them from that perspective, even if they don't end up having that property?
6 megawatts put them at the third largest purchaser of power, right? Second, put them above liquid air. Okay, so that's a hell of a deal right there.
I mean, that's a kind of value proposition.
I think maybe that's where that space we can already engage in.
We always do.
Wherever they land in McMinnville, that's still going to be on the table. So that conversation, that's great, Kathy, because that could continue to happen.
Right. And so I'm just wondering
like.
what is that doesn't seem like it needs to happen at the commission level, right? That seems like that conversation should sort of already be happening directly, and maybe it already has, or is there already discussions with Water and Light about the resources needed for this?
We've started.
Okay.
And I have one more question on that tier 2 pricing. When we go above, then how does our overall bill get disseminated to customers? If we're only paying at the higher rate for this amount, but we wouldn't be paying any higher rate, is everybody's bill affected? Is it?
I think that's what Jamie's talking about, is they would be separate.
I thought our concept was whoever incurs the cost pays the cost.
Well, remember, industrial customers are contracts at that level. So basically it's an individual contract with each of them. So Air Gas and Cascade each have their own contract directly with us. It's not melded with all the residential customers.
So, and then it's kind of first come, first serve. So since Cascade, for instance, right. But so then even though it's the combination of those kind of 3 large customers that are pushing us above this, it would still be only a new company that would carry the additional load. Other companies would not be affected.
And Remy, an important thing to know about that is that we got our tier 1 allocation based on historical use. And so essentially Cascade's use beforehand and Air Liquide's use created the tier one that they're taking advantage of now. And we actually helped them when the measurement time came, it was in a recession and they were shut way down. And so Sean, our staff went to Bonneville and actually got Bonneville to let them have another couple of years to rebuild their business and up their tier one. But their share of tier one is something that was essentially created by them. And if they hadn't been here, there wouldn't be any tier one.
We'd have lower tier
We'd
one.
have a lower. tier
Right,
one.
and just remember that those are, as Mr. Deeds said, those are individual contracts, so they're negotiated
Right.
contracts. So to a certain extent, it is what we negotiate.
It is what we negotiate, but you're right. I mean, they aren't entitled to it, but it's there because of them.
Well, these contracts are extremely favorable to the customer. I mean, they're really about the fact that Cascade has all this
Well,
employment. and-
remember, there's only 2 steel mills left on the West Coast. One is in McMinnville and the other's in
It's a
Seattle.
big incentive source to keep those. Yeah.
And so that actually might be, you might, if you had a similar contract for a new company, you might be able, where they're located, they might be able to say that there's some value to that. Because it'd be certainly, I mean, if they got away with comparing it to a PGE,
Yeah.
it'd be great, but it would be, it's basically, as I, excuse me, remember the contract works. The customer pays Bonneville directly for the power.
Well, they pay us.
Well, they pay we pass through the Bonneville rate to them. And then they pay us basically the cost of service. And I think there's a risk premium too, or something on that.
Yeah,
Or there is something
depending on if they provided
financials, yeah.
letter of credit or some
Right,
type of.
yeah.
Well,
So that may create value. That may be something that could create value for them dealing with us. And I think that if we're doing the same thing for another customer and we're getting our cost of service back from them.
Right.
My guess is, and I'm not going to speak for them, but my guess is we're not going to have the heartburns we would if we gave them a discounted lease or sold the property.
Absolutely.
well, it affects their bottom line. It's a lower cost of
Right.
utility,
we're-
right?
yeah.
And so if they can build that into their value proposition in their application. Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great discussion. Well, let's move into staff reports and we'll invite up John Spence.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. In your packet, you'll see bringing to you a staff report. Staff figured it was time to update some prices. It's been about 1.5 years since the front office opened back up to the public after COVID, and likewise about 1.5 years since we moved to the no fee credit card model. The 2 months that I'm comparing is March of 22 and December of 22, which is the most recent one I have information on. A couple of things I'd like to point your attention to is the number of payments are a little different. After some research, March is our biggest payment month. A couple things attribute to that. One, it's the number of most days that we're open as a company. There's no holidays. The month before is the shortest month. So some of our customers bill. So these, I wanted to remind you that these are payments collected, not bills sent. So we're still on the track that we're dependent on when a customer pays their bill. So just because we're telling them it's due on a certain date, they can pay ahead, they can pay on the date or behind. And in February being a short month, our bills are due 3 weeks after we bill. So some folks will actually have 2 due dates in March just because of where we bill them. So that could attribute to some of those extra payments in March as well. Some things that I have found unique or interesting. Our smart bill numbers, which we kind of thought moving into the no fee credit card model would shrink drastically, are actually starting to pick back up and get back closer to pre-COVID numbers. Smart bill is the payment that we trigger in the office that goes and directs money directly out of customers' accounts, and we run that twice a month. So we divide the reading routes in half. Everyone we read in the first half of the month, we deduct on the 25th. Everyone we read in the second half, we deduct on the 10th of the following month. So smart bill numbers should be relatively the same every month because we only do that twice. Credit cards, they're kind of, I mean, they've increased quite a bit since when we started this, right? So, but they are plateauing, but they're still increasing a little bit. What we're seeing decrease a little bit is the in-office checks, or I mean, just checks in general. Checks used to be by far the #1 payment mode. I have actually seen a few months now where the credit cards or smart bill has increased over our check intake, which I had not seen since I started here. And that is what kind of attributes to the total fees for the month in December being a little lower than in March. And the other thing that is just a few smaller payments or a few reduction in the number of payments. You might wonder why there's about 1,100 or 1,400 less payments. After doing some research on that, it really comes down to the number of days that we're open. So in December, we're only open 16 days. In March, we're open 19 days. The check payments can only be processed when we're in the office. So there's 3 extra days that we're able to process payments in March.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Right.
I kind of, if you guys have any questions or?
No, interesting information you're giving us. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you. Thank you, John.
You bet.
Question?
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. And we will now invite up Chad Hudson.
I never thought I'd be so excited about a fuel station.
So.
Say,
I don't know if
I've been
you
allowed
know,
to use it yet. They let you
Oh,
use it?
I
Shoot.
think it's nifty.
we actually used it a week and a half ago. We had that windstorm,
Oh,
and so we actually delivered about 2,100 gallons of fuel to the treatment plant.
excellent.
Twice.
Excellent.
Two deliveries.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
2 separate times. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Maybe in the beginning of it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to report is that we're up and running, we're operation, which is a big feat, I guess. So yeah, during the storm that we had the windstorm and the ice storm, we were able to take 2 truckloads up to the water treatment plant. As the generator was running. So it's kind of accomplishing the purpose that we set out, for emergency planning purposes. So that's been really good. There are a couple things that are outstanding on the project, very small things, but one of them is planting arborvitae along the fence line there. So we're trying to figure that out. Trying to get there. Yeah, but that's kind of the last thing is out there that's kind of standing. There's a couple small issues that the contractor's got to fix. There's a small leak in the control shed. They got to repair. So that's the biggest thing. It's a water leak. Yeah. This installed the door frame, so it's leaking around there. So, but outside of that, we came in under budget. It wasn't on time. A lot of that had to do with deliveries. The fuel tanks were out way longer than we thought, and then they started actually having some staffing issues towards the end there as well. So, but outside, it's been a successful project. We're up and running the card lock system. The software gave us a few hiccups at the beginning, but it was actually a pretty good IT and our fleet services really got to learn the system pretty well. We're still learning it, but they went through a learning process, which I think in the end is really going to help us out. So, well, I want to compliment you on how well you ran this project. Great job, kept us well informed, good pictures, and I know we're complete because you stayed on top of it. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
I think we need to name it.
You think we did what?
We need to name it. There's a lot of space on that.
It's the side, isn't it?
Yeah, like we've got gas.
Oh, great, yeah. You see that one, you almost had one, you have, we've got gas, people are gonna be lining up.
Yeah.
We on the side, yeah.
Let's have a contest.
Oh, no, you
Maybe.
don't want to do that.
No, just among the commission. And then Jody could win like a hat or something.
Yeah, you've got hats.
Oh, I like hats.
We've got hats.
We've got hats. There's one right there. We've got hats.
So I lived in Connecticut for a while and the signs we saw everywhere is we've got crabs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the best sign.
So we're gonna move into new business. I did have a request to discuss the letter that we received from Mr. Davis. So as not to change what's noticed on the agenda, I think we'll just do that when we get to commissioner comments. And then respectfully, given the nature of the letter, we can move up general manager comments and commissioner comments up above executive session. So as not to be horrifically ironic. There's gonna be discussion of that letter. Imperfect, yeah. So moving to that, we will now move into appointment of our chair and clerk. Any member of the commission may nominate any member of the commission for chair, including themselves. And we will take nominations until there are no more nominations being made, at which point I will call for a vote on each individual that is nominated. And so at this point, would anybody like to make nominations for chair?
I'd actually like to do this, the clerk first, because that's the easiest one. Would you mind?
Yes.
Wait, who are we?
Who's got a smile on their face?
I don't mind.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that Trina McManus continue to be our clerk. I'd make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion to appoint Trina McManus clerk from Commissioner Gormley and a second
Would you
from
like me to move to close the nominations, or going to get how formal you want to get?
Commissioner Tankersley. And would any other member of the commission like to nominate any other person for clerk of the commission? Not hearing any, I will close nominations and we will take a vote. We have a nomination to appoint Trina McManus as clerk of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the motion passes unanimously, and congratulations, Ms. McManus, you have unanimously appointed clerk of the Water and Light Commission. We'll now,
It's a historic job. Yeah. It's gonna go down in history.
You're in the book.
You're in the book.
we'll now repeat the process for the appointment of chair.
So Madam Mayor, it goes without saying that when you have someone that's been so well trained to do a job, that it might be best to have that person continue to do the job. So I would nominate the gentleman sitting to your left to continue to be our chairperson. But the clock's ticking. He and I both talked. Clock's ticking.
I would second that.
Okay, I have a nomination for Chair Tankersley for chair by Commissioner Gormley and a second by Commissioner Tate. Are there any other nominations for the seat of chair?
Who would dare? Who would
Not
dare?
hearing any, I
Excuse me,
will.
excuse me, Madam Mayor, before you vote, I would be honored and pleased to serve one more term. And then I believe that at the end of this term, we need a new chair who would be there, who would be chair. I could be there to help for a couple of years after that, unless, the council removes me or something. But
So what we're saying is the short straws stay with the boys and the girls get the long straws.
It's the term.
1 year. So that would leave.
We do this every year.
We do this every year, and so that would leave two years remaining, as I understand. Right, Trina? I think I'm till.
So you would be
25.
chair until 20.
Yes, you're the end of
No,
25.
I would be chair until the end of 23,
Hmm.
and then 24 and 25, there'd be a new chair, and I'd be available to help that person. And we'd be making a step towards our transfer of knowledge and power. And I think Ed's term expires a year before mine, as I remember.
24 for Ed.
So
yes.
that would allow the new chair to also enjoy Ed's knowledge.
Well,
So I'm going to complete the nomination process. I hear that you're willing to accept the nomination for
Please,
chair.
Please, yes.
Please to accept the nomination. So I have a motion and a second to appoint Tom Tankersley, Chair of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, please say nay. And the appointment is unanimous. Congratulations. You've
Thank you.
again been appointed Chair of the
Thank you.
McMinnville Water
Thank
and
you.
Light Commission.
Thank you.
so,
It's been-
I think that's wonderful.
It's the
Thank you.
best.
That's always my fear that you're going to say, and so I'm done.
No, it's clearly the best volunteer job in the county, if not the state. There's no question.
Well, it used to be when we got some substance of sort, subsistence of sort. Remember, we used to give them the goulash
To
dinners.
get dinner.
That sounds
The
delicious.
staff would eat and we'd scrape in the bowl for the last bit.
Yeah.
Decide maybe let's go get a hamburger instead.
So if I could just make a comment that during the strategic planning process, we talked about succession planning on the board, and I don't know the statute that or the charter that we have positions, but I would think that incoming chair elect or chair-elect would be something to consider. This is a huge body of work. And knowing that we have the pleasure of Commissioner Gormley for another 2 years and you for another 3 years, it's a lot, it's a steep climb.
So are you kicking us to the curb? Kelly?
Yes, it's that,
She's moved us out. She's
no,
forecasting.
I'm not jumping the shark or anything. I'm just saying that it's a big body of work.
Mhm. The charter creates the position of clerk and chair. The commission can create additional positions.
Oh, boy.
Like vice chair or something.
I
Vice
think
chair,
it bears discussion, but yeah.
Those positions are.
Are you suggesting that more as we go through strategic planning and we're putting some teeth to what succession planning looks like, we include language that encourages the outgoing chair to work with the incoming chair for the first X amount of time?
Right, so it's like a chair-elect, and then a past chair, sort of that structure that you create. I
It
also,
doesn't need to be a charter review or a charter.
I don't think so. I think it should be part of the strategic planning. I also would like to put on the table that it could be a rotating position and not ongoing. In other words, it's not a 10-year position, right? Like it rotates throughout the commission. I think that makes sense.
Every year.
Yeah,
The biggest role that I remember over the years is that the chair is here to function if the mayor doesn't make it. And we could be run totally different, but historically the mayor has tended to run the meetings and almost act like the chairman, even though they were the position's ex officio. We're just a member of
I
the
think the
board.
charter says the mayor runs the meeting.
The charter says the mayor runs the meeting. The charter actually says that the council president runs the meeting, even though that's not the way that we function, but that's actually what the charter calls out, is the council president is supposed to step in the absence of the mayor. Although the way that this functions is that the chair runs the meetings and similarly signs checks if the mayor's not available, but the charter reads that it's supposed to be the council president.
Which is interesting because the first 6-8 months that I was, before I got elected, I was here in that capacity in the 80s. So yeah, because the mayor wasn't making meetings.
That's not good. That's an essential function.
No, it was-
But I do also think it's part of our strategic planning process that we, pay attention to that, because the organization should be running according to the charter, not according to its own rules that it's adopted since our last charter review.
I
in
would-
1981.
I would agree with the mayor.
Good answer, Sam.
Excellent. So now, item B on our new business, and I think,
we need to vote.
well, yeah, we have
Did we
voted for
vote for
chair
the chair?
and clerk.
Yeah.
It was unanimous both times.
All right.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, and so now we're going to get a report on the finished water transmission main alignment from Steve Wendell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for being here.
I'd like to introduce to you Aaron Peter of Stantec Consulting Services, who's done the design work for this project. They've also done some large projects for us in the last few years, the 36-inch transmission main, which is the phase 2 portion of this, as well as the 24-inch main to the city of Lafayette. So we've done some fairly large project. He's here to present the finished water alignment study, which he's got a presentation for. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please ask.
Welcome.
Steve, well, as you mentioned, I'm Aaron Eater with Stantec. I've worked with you guys since 2016. Most recently, as Steve mentioned, the phase 2 project, 36-inch transmission main, and also some other various miscellaneous projects over the years. Been with Stantec for 8 years, consulting in Oregon for 28 years. All my career has been spent on designing water conveyance pipelines, just like this one. And so if you want to hit the next slide, we'll get right into it. So as a background context, your existing transmission system is a combination of 1940s era 14-inch AC and 16-inch steel main, and late 1960s era 24-inch ductile iron main. You can see up in the upper left your Scott water treatment plant. On the lower right is the distribution reservoirs on Fox Ridge Road. The 14-inch and 16-inch mains are in color green, and the 24-inch ductile iron is colored in yellow. You can see from this graphic that for the most part, they are run parallel to each other. There are a couple of areas where they diverge in alignment from each other. As you can see, the upper one we're going to refer to as phase 7 later on. And in the lower right corner where they diverge is we're referring to that as phase 4. Your 2011 water master plan recommended replacing the entirety of the 14-inch and 16-inch system with a 36-inch main using a phased approach. And what this will do is give McMinnville Water and Light the ability to convey the full 30 million gallons per day capacity of your watershed, and it allows for future growth and redundancy. And the result of that, when this program is completed, you'll have a fully redundant 24-inch and 36-inch parallel mains within the same easement. You have a fully redundant system with interties located at each transition between various phases, and it will allow you to convey your full water treatment plant capacity, which is also the watershed capacity of full 30 million gallons per day. Next slide. So part of our work for you, we did a comparison of whether to run the new 36-inch line parallel to the 16-inch or the 24-inch, where the two lines diverge in those two phases I mentioned, phase 7 and phase 4. We came up with a list of criteria you can see here. We rated them on a scale of 1 to 3, with 3 being the best or the highest, 1 being the lowest or worst. The criteria that we came up with was listed here: environmental impacts, geotechnical considerations, conflicts with existing utilities, any required easements, hydraulic considerations, impacts to existing customers, constructability, and cost of construction. These are generally criteria that are used on past evaluations similar to this. So kind of an industry standard, if you will.
Excuse me, those are the existing customers that are outside the city that are hooked up to the mains?
Either that or the mains will run through their property if they're not connected to your system.
Okay. And that's 15% of the total impact. And that's not very many customers, right?
Correct. And we'll talk about that more specific in the later slides. Next slide. So the result of our evaluation is our recommendation to that the new 36-inch line should follow the existing 24-inch line. And as I mentioned previously, it'll be an intertie to intertie phased approach is our recommendation. And what you see here is in different colors is the different phases of the project. Most of these are comparable in length, phases 3, 5, 6, and 8. Phases 4 and 7 are significantly longer. And the reason for that is because those are the two alignments that diverge from each other. Installing a temporary bypass between the two would be a long length of temporary bypass, and it would generally be in an area not accessible to your crews for operation and maintenance purposes. There will be, as we mentioned, impacts on properties and current customers. Phase 7, there you have 5 customers on the existing 14-inch, 16-inch main, and 19 parcels impacted overall. And you have 1 customer on the 24-inch main.
These 5 customers, and the one, they're strictly services to residences for the most part. Correct. They're not big dairies or anything like that. No. So I think in the past, we figured out how to create jumper situations where run temporary, you got to run hoses or something across ground mower. Because until we get that main, installed and tested and
Well,
we're not gonna.
Well, on phase 7, I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, the realignment would basically isolate those customers and they would no longer have water because we would relocate that main. So they would be out of water at that point. Because they would have no access to the main, because the main would be gone.
But what I'm saying is that we'd have to figure out some temporary way of getting them.
No, it would, our easement, once we no longer have a water pipe there or that need, the easement goes away and the pipe essentially, that the way our easements are written. Is that correct?
But what is so these easements are what, maybe 30 to 50 years old?
No, some of them are.
Those 16-inch mains is in an easement from 1917.
Yeah.
So John, if you're you're the person with the 75-year and you knock on the door, you're
that's
by the way you start drilling the well. I mean they've been with us
for a long time,
for so long. That a fairness issue there, I'd struggle with.
That's one of the things that's one of the concerns is how you continue to serve them water at that point.
But we need to recognize they committed to us and allowed us.
So we've thought a little bit about that too.
I mean, water in the country is just,
that we recognize it's going to be an issue.
all the water in the air. Oregon's the worst place in the world trying to drill wells.
Exactly. Yeah, figure that out.
Okay.
But there's options of adding tie-ins,
No,
private customer tie-ins.
Well, he was saying no, that once they're easy.
Well, no, I understand the easement's going away, but I'm saying, there's a option of a spur or some sort of private.
The board could say you will continue to provide water.
yeah, and the way you would end up potentially doing that is through some type of water district, where you would give them basically a meter at where the old line is, and then they take over that. As an option.
Maybe this is not the right question to be asking, but are any of these locations in areas that'll be developed in the future? Or are they tend to be isolated areas?
Well, remember, since we're out in the country, the way that worked is we would give in exchange for the easement, we would give one water service.
Okay. Oh,
John, I think her question is, how close is it to the city where it's going to be developed?
You're talking that distance is 10 miles.
But these are not near urban areas.
Yeah, so not near any.
okay.
And so they're.
Got it.
If you look at the green right there, that's really where that's Fox Ridge at the bottom there. The green where it says reservoirs, distribution reservoirs. That's our service reservoirs. So the tanks on Fox Ridge, the very bottom.
Yes.
And then everything up to the treatment plant is actually in the country.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah.
Every both boundaries are correct. So,
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good.
Leave people high and dry.
Oh, it's still on?
Yeah, thank you. So at the bottom of this page, you can see our updated opinion of probable construction costs for these various phases. In the middle column is our raw cost, and the difference between that and the total opinion of probable construction costs, we've added 30% contingency and 10% markup for market volatility. Just because of the unknowns and the fact that there are, other than phase 3, not developed plans for these phases yet. And so, you know, we don't want to lead our clients astray by giving them lowball numbers. We err on the side of conservatism and apply contingencies and market volatility considerations to our numbers.
And you might mention what our master plan was in 2011, what the cost was then.
Oh, no. Don't do that.
You want me to?
Yeah,
It's 24 million for the whole thing.
in 2011.
4 times.
When is, so I understand that this is a probable construction cost based in 2023. We're not building this in 2023,
Correct.
right? So where is it on this
It's out
capital improvement plan?
a long way with that, with
10
those
years.
costs, probably or more. Because, you know, think about $100 million and we have $21 million in the bank.
And Sam will not let us buy lottery tickets.
No, you may not buy.
So
lottery
it's
tickets.
gonna have to be the phased approach where we pick a piece and do that piece and then look for potential grants or other ways to fund.
In the past, we've borrowed.
Okay,
So just to give you some data points to consider, when your phase 2 project was bid in December, January of 2018-19, 36-inch ductile iron was $251 a foot from the supplier. When we updated when we did our phase 3 opinion probable construction cost last June, it was $423 a foot. And when we talked to them last week for an update from advance of this presentation, $490 a foot. So prices are rising, as you guys have probably.
Is that just the cost of pipe? or
Just
that's
the cost of pipe from the supplier. No.
Wow.
I can't imagine there's an appetite to reduce
And
that.
it's that.
Once you're there, right?
Yeah, what's with HDB, where's that at, price wise?
We haven't considered HDB for this because of the high pressures that we're looking at for this. It's really not an appropriate pipe material for this project.
Because we get gravity doing some tricks for us here, don't
Your
we?
low spots,
Big time, yeah.
250 PSI.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, where's steel at? Would that be a potential option?
We bid steel and ductile for your phase 2 project just to keep everyone honest and see how the prices compared, and they came out very comparable.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Any questions of the commission? Any additional questions?
Is this table in our packet? This alignment page?
No.
This is updated for this presentation.
Okay.
But there are cost numbers in that packet.
Thank you very much.
This is great. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
wait, there's more.
You're just sort of, okay,
The numbers.
all right. The next slide.
Next slide, please. So to give you an update on where we are on this program, you can see in the lower right, the green alignment is phase 3. It goes from your Fox Ridge reservoirs up to Baker Creek Road. There are 2 properties impacted with this phase. It's an alignment that's approximately 4,400 feet in length. It crosses Baker Creek, and because that is a water of the state, it triggers environmental permitting through joint permit with the Army Corps and Department of State Lands. Just last week, we completed the field work as part of that effort. They did wetland delineations and they did cultural resources study to look for any archaeological history in the area. preliminary findings are that there was nothing detected, so that's good news.
That's good news.
You can see in the graphic at the bottom, the approach that we took on phase 2, which will take with the remaining phases, is that the new 36-inch main will be located in a 50-foot easement that will also include the existing 24-inch ductile iron line and the 4 3-inch electrical conduits for communications. And next slide. Phase 4 is the next phase north of the green line. It's the yellow line. It extends from Baker Creek Road to the inner tie that was completed with phase 2 at the Sitten property. It's about 750 feet in length, one stream crossing in Berry Creek. So we'd be looking at the same permitting requirements for that effort. There will be 5 properties impacted with that phase. And similar to the graphic that we shared on the previous slide, it will be located in a similar easement configuration as we're looking at for phase 3 and 2.
Do our conduits have to do with the water system, or are they, or this electric system just piggybacking on it?
My understanding is that communications between the water treatment plant and the service reservoirs.
Thank you.
Fiber.
Yeah, that's the fiber.
It's,
What about the?
Oh, it's too long to run that extension cord and get rid of Western Oregon.
The
Power.
electrical, we need electrical too for valves or something, or?
We haven't really talked about doing any
No, they're all
actuated valves, are all
Yeah.
manual.
So why do we have electrical conduit?
For the fiber optic cable, it's the same conduit you would run
Oh,
for.
it's just, oh, so, okay, there's, so it's okay, so it's for the fiber.
I
Okay,
called it
great, thank
electrical,
you.
but it's for fiber.
Yeah.
Great.
Light through pipe.
Next slide. And so the next steps, again, we're currently in phase 3, 90% design is getting ready to wrap up and deliver to you. The easement acquisition process is in process with the 2 properties on phase 3. And I mentioned we completed the field work for the Army Corps and DSL permitting last week. We anticipate submitting that application to the agencies in March. They will take a month or so to review for completeness, and all in all, it should take 6 months maximum. And so we're looking at wrapping up design when that process completes in August. And then in phase 4, we're looking at getting started on that soon, and with 50% design in June, 90% in December. Similar easement acquisition process as we're currently doing with phase 3, but with 5 properties. Or Sitten is already acquired, so 4. Okay. And environmental permitting is not included in that design scope. And then, as John was mentioning earlier, the discussions with what to do with the customers in the phase 7 piece with the 5 customers on the 16-inch. Is that correct? That was correct. 5. Yeah.
And that timeline on phase 7, again, when those 5 customers would be impacted.
Have not had those discussions with Mac Water and Light yet, as far as timing of phase 7.
I would speculate it could be decades.
Okay.
Because
Funding is just going to be the bugger.
Yeah. And that's the one, actually, that's the longest phase, right? That's the most expensive piece. Because it was 14,000 feet.
So this concern about these 5 customers losing access to water is something we should be aware of as we move through, but there's really no immediate impact to slow process.
Just a real simplistic question. For those 5 customers, could you run a smaller line down the inside of the 14 or 16-inch pipe that you're abandoning? And then when you get to their takeoffs of the existing pipe, just tap into that, and we would still have our easement for that, and it shouldn't be much work, right?
That is a concept that we've talked about at a high level.
Okay, great. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a major necessarily. Okay, great. Thank you.
You have more?
I believe that's the last one.
Okay.
John, could the board get copies of that? Sure. This is really interesting, fascinating stuff. Love to hang on.
Yeah,
to
I
it.
think Trina has it, don't you, Trina?
Okay, or just send it to me as a PDF or something.
Yeah, no problem.
Aaron, in regards to the 14-16 inch versus the 24-inch, my understanding is the agreement on phase 7 there, the hydrology of it would affect the pressure zones below. Is the green line higher?
The green line is a higher elevation, lower pressure.
So basically it means that we're restricting the water flow. Currently, and the reason you're moving phase 7 to the 24 alignment is to reduce that hydraulic restriction. Or eliminate it essentially.
Which that means is there 272 mark for zone 2 increases up to 500 elevation, so plus or minus.
Some pumping becomes at zone 2.
Great. Additional questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you.
Right, and we'll now go to our clerk, Trina McManus, to present.
Yes, good evening. Tonight, I'm presenting the staff recommendation to enter into a personal services contract with Utility Financial Solutions to perform an electric cost of service analysis and rate design. McMinnville Water and Light has typically aligned electric cost of service updates with BPA rate cases, which occurs every 2 years. A new BPA rate case will go into effect this year on October 1st, 2023. UFS has provided McMinnville Water and Light with cost of service analyses and rate design since 2011. And Mr. Beauchamp, president of UFS, has over 30 years of experience in the utility environment. It's necessary to update our electric cost of service model on a regular basis to include current power cost information and ensure that McMinnville Water and Light is recovering costs, O&M expenses, and risk. Some additional items included in this engagement, besides the updated rate designs and long-term financial projections, are an updated lighting study, review of transformer rental rates, power factor penalty calculations, and purpose standards review and recommendation that Jamie Phillips talked to the commission about in November relating to demand response and electric vehicle charging programs. Staff recommendation tonight is to award the personal services contract to UFS to perform the electric cost of service analysis and rate design for services that total $32,800. One outstanding question for the commission is whether you would like Mr. Beauchamp to present the results of the cost of service analysis in person for an additional cost of $3,000 plus out-of-pocket travel expenses, or if a Zoom presentation is sufficient. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Do we have to answer that tonight as far as the presentation person?
Cost.
It would impact the overall cost, and he would need at least a couple of months heads up to make the appropriate travel arrangements, but we could do it without the in-person and then change it later if we needed to, if you prefer.
It's always nice to have him here in person because there are things that it just I'm just a little more comfortable at times with him in person, but I mean,
Yeah,
we've learned to live with Zoom.
but for $3,000 plus the travel costs. I like the idea of let's do it without it. And if something comes up in the process that's so complicated that we think we need to have him here, we do it then. But
I can't imagine it being that complicated.
yeah,
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, so anything that's a presentation, they don't need to fly here. If it's a discussion or some sort of strategic,
yeah.
determination,
John, do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm fine with the Zoom. I think that
Okay.
works. And the $5,000 you save
Yeah.
probably by the time you're done
I
with it.
did ask Mark if he had a strong preference either way, or if he felt comfortable doing this type of presentation on Zoom, and he's gotten quite used to the Zoom presentations, so he felt fine with it.
Well, unless there's any further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
Also moved.
A second.
Right, and I'm understanding your,
Just the
Yeah.
expense and
Yeah, do you want to clarify what you're moving?
The fee for service at 32,008 and not exercising the option part of it.
Great.
Right, and I understand the text of the motion will be from the action requested, finding it most advantageous to Water and Light, contracting for this personal service contract with Utility Financial Solutions to perform the electric cost of service analysis, rate design, and direct staff to prepare the necessary contract documents to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Gormley and a second by Commissioner Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now moving into our Customers Helping Customers program update, and we'll invite John Spence back.
Thank you. Okay, in your packet, you'll find the memo on the Customers Helping Customers. Staff is looking for commission approval to maintain our current ratio of matching of 3-to-1, which is $2.50 for electric and 50 cents for water for every dollar donated by customers, matching up to $20,000 in the calendar year. Kind of a quick history in the last year. The Customers Helping Customers program started off really well in the calendar year of 2022 at about $91,400, which was stronger than the year prior. There was a lot better donations, and Water and Light and City matched and hit their capacities in those years. So that allowed for the increase. During the calendar year of this year, donations have been down a little bit. So we didn't quite see that strength, but it was enough for both the City of McMinnville and Water and Light to match this year. Water and Light matches based on the calendar year. City of McMinnville does the fiscal year. So there was enough to match City of McMinnville's first half. Second half is still to be determined. The other thing I wanted to mention, a lot of assistance this year, $68,000. Which is great. So with the donations down a little bit, the fund ended at, I'm sorry, I lost my place for that. 75.5. So a little bit less than the prior year, but a lot more folks in assistance this year. With that, I would open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Questions here.
Real quick, please. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
So has the amount that we help the customer changed over the past few years?
It hasn't changed. The last time I think I noted down was in, I want to say 17 or 18. We raised the limit to $6,000 per month that we could assist with in total. So we gave
per customer though.
Didn't we raise that?
per customer. It used to be 150 when I first started. I think in the same time frame that Mr. Dietz mentioned, we are now at 250.
And when's the last time and that can apply to several months' bills for people, right?
Yes. So the policy allows the general manager to make those determinations, and we have been doing that on a monthly basis, but we haven't changed it for some time. Since we raised it to $6,000 on a monthly cap. It's also a one-time assistance help in a 13-month period up to 250. So if they don't get all their 250, they still have to wait the 13 months for assistance again.
I'd kind of let's don't do it now, but I'd like to look at, and John, I know it's your decision, but because we've delegated to you, but I'd like to see whether we think we're applying enough assistance given the amount of money we have.
So that's probably, that might be one of the
Yes.
things we want to talk about in item F.
Right, okay, but even if we don't decide to do anything with the BCA money about this, I'd like to look at that, please.
And if we vote on this now, we could still make adjustments to it.
Right. Yes.
If we talk about putting more money in.
Yes, I think with the notion of I believe item F is
right
is the refund coming was going to approach and increasing our matching dollar.
Yeah.
But not knowing what we're going to do with that yet. We have the luxury of waiting another month because the general manager can adjust those limits, if we start seeing a steep decrease, we could shorten the limit that we help with every month. Or adjust the amount we do as well. But if we see a sharp decline, we'll probably ask for more matching because we have been meeting the match within the first 3-4 months of the year.
Wow.
So that would be another way to do
Yep.
something, and that would raise the balance, which then we can raise the.
But I mean, we ended the year with a balance, so it's not that we didn't have enough money.
Right.
My concern is we may not be paying enough to meet.
Not
people's
distributing
needs.
enough money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not paying enough out.
Wasn't this designed initially that we would money in, money out, not really have a surplus?
Yeah, we used to, actually, our surplus was.
It was a lot.
100,000, so we.
It was a lot, and I think our limits were too,
So we.
I
they're
think,
too small.
so I think your comment about if we're sitting with 75,000, really by adjusting the numbers could be giving away that much more money.
Right, but we want to make sure we have enough to cover at least the next, some period into the future in case.
Want to have a cushion in case.
Right, donations drop off.
dry up.
Right, so that's why we've been a little bit, to let it go down too low.
I feel like, I was talking to Tom earlier, or to you earlier, but I feel like there, if we had some thoughts around, really putting a lot of emphasis on customer donations, then our matching
Could go up.
could go up. And I feel like that's a really good thing for Water and Light to be working with the community on, especially with the economic times and the city fee. Like, there's people that, are in tighter places.
$10 is groceries, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've seen is we do have some folks that like to donate at the end of the year. And they've called ahead and say, are you done matching for the year? And they'll wait till January. And so that they get their full $3 match from us.
So.
And $1 from the city, so every dollar turns into $5.
Yeah,
So it doesn't take long for the $20,000 that McMinnville Water and Light matches to cap.
yeah.
Just for clarity, Commissioner, if a customer qualifies for customer helping customer dollars already, then they also have a reduction in the city service charge. So they're not paying the $13.40, they're paying $1.34.
That window.
Yeah, so if they're a customer qualifies for this,
They go from
They-
13 to 130.
they go
So
from
that's
13 to
only for the
134.
low.
That's only for the
So I
city
was
service
thinking
charge.
maybe it also was like somebody who had a one-time unexpected.
I don't disagree with what you're saying.
No,
I just wanted to add
no, I
clarity
appreciate
that
that.
if
Yeah.
we're talking about offsetting the $13.40
Yeah.
a month, that
They're
if
already getting
there
that
are,
offset. Yeah,
right.
I wasn't clear that it was only that group of people. I thought maybe
for the
other
service
people
charge?
with unexpected.
And we get both.
Expenses and things like that,
But those people also would benefit because you can't do the formula perfectly. Somebody who had an unexpected 1 or 2 month thing would get a year or two of low income city services charge, right? Whatever that period is.
Like if they qualified for
if they
other,
qualified
yeah, like
for
why,
us.
yeah,
If they qualified for us just because of a 1 month or 2 month problem for our customers helping customers, they wouldn't be treated any differently than somebody who's chronically low income, right?
I believe that's correct. Once you qualify.
That's
Go
what
ahead.
I understood.
So.
I want to make sure I understand it. I
Yeah.
think the question is once someone gets assistance, they're moved to the low income rate for the city service charge.
Yes.
They are at that rate currently until they cancel service with us.
So it's more than 2, it could be more than 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
And the thought behind that is most of those folks tend to stay at that and get repetitive assistance. And if they were to change their category, they tend to move somewhere else. So that's when we'll sever that connection and look at if they're moving, and they will have to look and see if they have received it in the last 2 years at that point. And if they have, we'll start them at the new one. But if they haven't, then they'll start at the regular rate or a multifamily rate if they're moving to an apartment or something of that nature.
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Just to clarify, St. Vincent de Paul,
Yes.
Salvation Army, they're the ones,
So it's St.
Just St. Vincent.
just St. Vincent, do the funds, okay.
And they've been, what would you say? I think they've been great to work with.
They've been great. They call us, they verify stuff, and a reminder, they're doing it free of charge for us.
Yeah,
So they manage it very well for us.
Dollar for dollar goes to the customer.
That's wonderful.
Great. All right, thank you. Not hearing any further discussion, I would call for a motion to approve maintaining
So
current
moved.
3-to-1 McMinnville Water and Light match
Except that Sam's got some.
No, the mayor was going to read
of
it. so
$2.50 for electric and 50 cents for water for every $1 donated to the Customers Helping Customers Program Fund with a maximum contribution of $20,000 for calendar year 2023. I hear a motion from Commissioner Gormley. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Sorry.
Excuse me.
Just to kind of continue just for just a second. If we did some promotional things or sent a note out encouraging people, if you have the ability to help out, could you? So are we considered a nonprofit to where there'd be a tax credit for doing that?
I think, aren't you the one that gets that?
Yeah, you get a donation. You
Yeah,
get a
yeah, I
deduction
think
for it.
Tom usually asks for that.
Yeah, just a letter and yeah.
So I think if we would let people know that.
I think we're gonna have a little bit of discussion in item F
Okay,
about.
Okay.
I'm
Some of the
excited
options.
about
I think
items.
most
There's a
folks
lot there.
might use their receipts, but I believe customers over $100 donation, I'll send a letter thanking them for their
Okay.
donation. Also, just wanted to remind on the way out that this is also a time that for the city to just they've been doing $1 as well, matching. It's a good time to see if they want to continue doing that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
And next, we're moving into action items for our financial audit contract with Moss Adams.
It's
And
a
I'll
good time for everybody to leave.
invite up Mark Dunmeyer, our finance director.
It's good to see you all.
Yeah. Audit report.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
Set me up with you.
So yeah, we just finished our 2022 audit and that marked the end of our 3-year contract with Moss Adams. And there was a provision for 2 additional years to extend, but without a price as a part of that. We didn't enter into an extension and instead looked at considered an RFP, and given the market kind of conditions that I identified in my staff report, we thought we would go ahead and request a proposal from Moss Adams for 3 years, which they provided. You can see from what their proposal is, costs have gone up significantly. So, and I detailed, and we kind of expected that things were going to be higher. I had mentioned that I had been to an Oregon Government Finance Officer Conference in October, and there was actually a session on this. And there was an audit firm presenting as well as the state municipal auditor, and they were talking, and then also a finance director from the city, talking about issues all related to staffing for both audit firms and for cities. And cities are having a hard time filling open positions in accounting, and the state municipal audit roster. It's interesting. I looked at that today. Back when we did 3 years ago, when we went out for RFP, there were 293 municipal auditors on the state's list. You have to be a CPA and you have to be licensed by the state to be able to do municipal audit. So there's kind of 2 hurdles you have to have. And so there's 293 at that time. Today, there's 195.
Oh.
So it's a third of a reduction. So the market is not favorable. And so some cities have actually experienced where they go out for an RFP and they don't get any responses. So it's difficult to tell what the market's like without doing an RFP. We know it's higher. I did inquire with our lead, our audit partner, Keith Simovic, and he responded and let me know that yeah, he obviously acknowledged the prices are much higher. They are experiencing significant staffing cost increases. As you can imagine, with difficulty that businesses are having filling open accounting positions, not just
in the municipal sector, but also in the commercial sector. And audit staff at CPA firms are great hires. They already have relationships with those folks. So they're having a hard time keeping their people, plus just inflation in general, which we've seen. So they've experienced a 30% increase in their staffing costs over the last couple of years. And then he also mentioned that the audits are becoming more complex, and so they're spending more hours. We just this last year implemented GASB 87 on the leasing standard, and we really weren't hugely affected by that, but it took our staff a lot of time to go through all of that. They have to do that for each individual audit, of course, that they do. So there's just a lot. There's additional work that they're doing. So it's really a combination of the same thing for both cities and for the municipal auditors, more work and less staff. And so it just drives the market higher. And so that's what we saw. So about a 46% increase over the total 3-year contract compared to the last, if we were to enter into an agreement or a contract with them to do the next 3 years. And we just overall considered, again, the 3-year versus maybe a 1 year, and that would be the other option, is rather than doing a 3-year contract with them, we could request a 1-year engagement and then go out for an RFP after. So that would be the other option, and to see how the market is then. It's hard to know where it'll be at that time as well. So
Thank you.
So let's think about doing that. Huge risk to it.
Yeah.
So are they locked in on the 3-year pricing? So it's firm. And so if they get hammered again with shortage of staff, and
right. Yeah, that's
they don't have any legal language in there to.
So the question I would have is, how long does it take to get somebody to be up to speed to be a municipal auditor?
Oh,
well, what I understand from the conference is that the audit firms that have lost some municipal auditors aren't overly, many of them are just saying we're out of the municipal audit business because it doesn't pay very well. And there's a lot of consulting work because there's a lot of need for help, because organizations don't have enough accounting staff. So what do? In order to get ready for their audit, they'll hire another firm to come in and do their books for them to help them get through some of these difficult challenges. And so they're filling what they used to fill with audit time, they're filling it with consulting time, and it's much more lucrative to do it that way. The other issue they have is where cities can't get their audits done by December 31st, they have to extend, then their audit staff is having to work on that rather than tax work in the tax season. But of course, that pays much better too.
So don't you have to sit for your license a certain amount of audit time?
You do.
So I can think of people coming out of college, jumping on these things, get this in, and so maybe people aren't running into that as quick as.
Yeah, I wasn't able to confirm this today, but I remember from a couple of years ago, there was discussion at one of our OGFOA meetings where they were talking about board seats, and they ended up having a general conversation about just the number of people that were part of the organization, and it is declining. That was my memory from them. I tried to confirm that to find out how much today. I wasn't able to, but that's I think what my sense is there are fewer people coming in and more demand on the workload. So,
but historically, there's never been a tremendous, like you put out an RFP, you're not going to get 25 companies, right, and there just aren't that many companies around to do that.
We got 3 last time.
Yeah, which.
So Mark, is there anything that you've heard or figured out on your own that would tell you that things will be better? There's a reason things will be better next year than they are now.
Nothing that I can tell is telling me that things will be different next year.
Okay. Then I think we ought to go with the 3-year.
And this is the same firm that not only Water and Light, but has been working with for many years.
Yes.
Yeah. I would also lean in the direction of securing the 3-year contract. If I were a voting member of this commission.
You are.
I just have one clarifying question. So I have 2, I'm in favor of a 3-year contract. Does this new contract have a 2-year re-up? Well,
It
1 year.
it does not have a provision for additional extensions after.
Would there be value in adding that into it?
If they priced it for us, we didn't have. to
Probably
do it
only
formally
if they
last
price
night.
it. If they just don't,
They're not willing to do that at this
I
point.
think we just asked them for a 3-year
We,
price.
I guess if we were thinking of doing it similar to how we did it before. And since it really turned out that the extensions weren't really, we couldn't really execute without a price. We just ended up leaving that off. I think part of it too is just being,
Well,
No.
They would probably agree to unpriced extensions.
But it's
I mean,
That seems,
Yeah,
but yeah, that doesn't add.
that's what I
any
was saying,
value.
the ones the
Yeah.
extensions we had were unpriced, correct?
they were.
So
And that's probably
Is that
their standard.
And it's just
Excuse me?
their longest
implied
term
good
contract
faith
that they
and fair
do.
dealing, but you don't want to get.
I don't know
about that. No,
I think because they're having to lock in their pricing.
Right.
It would be interesting to see if they do.
I'm sure,
4 or 5.
I'm sure they would at a price that's high enough.
All the other prices go.
One thing that's interesting is I talked with the finance director at the city, Jennifer. The city's auditors their contract expires in 2025 also. And the city auditors have told them that they are no longer going to do municipal audits after that. So they'll be looking. So the it would be interesting if we ended up with the same auditors. That would be-
Moss Adams does, this is a niche market for them. They specialize in.
Sounds like it's becoming a better niche too.
A utility.
Out and
And from being on the audit committee for many years, I think they really appreciate working with our staff. I think that, we're not somebody they would want to get rid of because we're a pain in the neck.
Our timing is, I think, pretty good for them as well, because our audit gets completed in November. So that allows them to then switch resources to the ones that go to December and just give them some flexibility. So-
Thank you. Do we need any additional discussion or should we move for a motion?
Right.
Yes, the action requested is the commission finding it most advantageous and approval to enter into a 3-year personnel services contract is prepared by legal counsel with Moss Adams for financial auditing services and authorization for the mayor and clerk to sign the contract or alternatively approve award of for a 3-year contract. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
A
My
motion
second.
by Commissioner Tate and a second by Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now everything, what everybody's excited for, reserve distribution clauses. So I'd like to welcome up Jamie Phillips to join our general manager, John Dietz, in presenting the BPA power reserves distributions.
Thank you. Yes, the much anticipated item F. I'm gonna try to keep it brief because my voice is running low.
You sure? Which
No,
more?
I'll be fine.
Okay.
So the reserve distribution clause is a component of BPA's financial reserves policy, which triggers when their net revenues reach a certain threshold. I'll note that each business line, both power and transmission, have unique thresholds and triggers. And for fiscal year ending 2022, both business lines triggered an RDC. BPA had a banner year thanks to high water conditions and high market prices combining to result in net secondary sales that were at an unprecedented level. So and I'll also mention that the BPA administrator is given discretion to use those surplus funds for the highest value purpose. And in December, the administrator issued his decision on the transmission RDC, which was a $63 million surplus. And you can see the breakout of how that was used there. Just for reference, the $12.9 million dividend distribution to reduce current year transmission rates equates to about $40,000 for McMinnville. So relatively small amount compared to what we're going to discuss in a moment. But still something it also served to stabilize rates for the next rate period for transmission and to mitigate any forecasted cost increases. So all in all, a good thing. And then there was some delay in the decision for the power RDC due to the high volume of public comment that the administrator received, particularly from interests, fish and wildlife interests, groups that were, pushing for different use of those funds to invest in fish and wildlife and conservation. Ultimately, the administrator issued his decision on January 6th, consistent with the proposal that had been arrived upon that had been issued in November. So the power RDC was capped at $500 million. And of that, $350 million is going toward reduction in power rates via dividend distribution to customers. And that's what we're here to talk about. McMinnville Water and Light's portion of that $350 million is roughly $5.65 million. And that is an allocation based on our tier 1 allocation. And of that 5.6 million, and that will be distributed to us via credits to our power bill over the next 10 months. Well, actually, we've already received the first month. So through September, of the total, approximately half will be passed through to our industrial customers as part of their contracts, their costs and any BPA costs or benefits are a direct pass through. So Cascade Steel will receive $2.3 million credited to their power bills over the next 9 months now. Airgas around 369,000. And then the remaining $2.967 million is allocated to our distribution customers, our residential and commercial sector. So that's what we're here to discuss with the commission, look for feedback and ideas. We have staff has spent quite a bit of time discussing options. We don't have to make any decisions. I mean, this money it's an offset to power costs, so it will reduce our expenses through September. But it is a significant sum, and if there's ways that we can discuss maybe redirecting that, we would like to get some input. So several options are listed here. Certainly open to other ideas. Rate stabilization is an obvious one, as well as bill credits. I think those were mentioned in the past. Investments in conservation rebates is an option. We could increase our rebates to customers. Capital investment, also an important consideration. And as was mentioned earlier, the Customers Helping Customers program, as well as resource development, looking into the future for our utility. There's ways we could invest there. So
I want to
stop there.
Start by observing. Thank you very much. I'm going to start by observing that some of the things that are listed here as options to look at for this money are things or are linked with things that we're also going to be discussing in the strategic planning session that we're about to go into. And so I wonder if we, of course, have conversation now about the information, ask questions, but think about delaying decision-making about those monies until we're at least a few steps further into strategic planning, as that should kind of set the course of organizationally where we want to head.
we're getting that prorated every month to us
Right,
anyway.
so
So I
it-
mean, and you're accounting for it. So
Yeah.
we want to put this off for a month or two. I mean,
we wanted to bring it so that, it was on the radar.
well, we saw what the amount is finally.
Right, and so you know what the amount is, here's some options, are there potentially other ones as we move through these things? Because there may be other options that the commission wants to explore.
Is there any sort of clock on the money? Are we required to have it allocated? Do we have a
We can
reporting
keep it.
mechanism?
There's
Just
no,
keep
there's
getting
no
money.
limitations or
You don't even have to do anything. with it.
it's.
They could just go to reserves and that,
It's identified as where the money came from.
Yeah, it's
We-
RDC money.
As far as the accounting of it goes, and Mark can maybe clarify, but it's simply a reduction to our power bill. So the line items for our power costs are going to be lower.
Got it.
Well, there will be a separate line item for this credit, but when you look at the power budget, it's going to be lower.
Got it.
But we can account for it specifically in the GL.
I agree with the mayor. I think that's,
So
let's
as
be
part
smart
of,
about how we spend the money and think about them.
and as part of the strategic plan process that we're gonna go through and the employees are going through, as far as like conservation and resource development and capital investment, would we get some more detailed information about what specifically we're thinking about in those areas? I mean, that's part of the strategic planning process. And
I think the idea here was that, we've identified some things, go through the process and then pick out the things, and then we would come back with a plan for those individual items. Where we would allocate dollars to those items.
yeah, I think for me, it's like resource development. I would have a hard time thinking about what those things are, but
Right.
more importantly, like, what do they cost? Like,
Yeah.
what is realistic and, how much money do we, it seems like we have tons of money, we can do
Right,
all these
but-
things, but I don't know, what things actually
Right.
cost
I mean,
and.
It could be something like, just funding a consultant to develop a resource plan. So it's wide open,
Could be sending somebody to
some of
school
it
to become an
is
auditor.
undefined.
So I think we would like a list of more specific ideas about resource development for one thing, please.
Right. But I mean, that's why, we wanted to have the discussion, but we really wanted to have it before the strategic plan.
Right,
So that
yes, right.
it ties in.
Yeah.
Because ultimately there may be items that are not on this list that we identify.
So one item, and I don't know if the organization thinks about this, but would be to create a matching fund for grants that might be coming up. I don't know if you build that into your budget or not, but I think
Oh.
with all the infrastructure dollars that are coming down and through the state, there might be an opportunity there.
The other one that we don't have on that list, on this list, is probably workforce development.
So that would be, right, and I would think that it would, the specifics of that, like. A recruitment and retention strategy around a more diverse workforce. And really getting laser focused on those kinds of things, more women, more diverse populations, and how to access and how to communicate that. And under customers helping customers, I think we riffed a little bit about this on how to grow customer donations. That's a professional field, happen to be married to one, who raises money, and there's strategies that can be used and there's campaigns that can be built. And so there might be an opportunity to invest in getting more donations.
I think philosophically, if you go back to how did we get this money, it came from people paying light bills.
Right.
And I'm really concerned about the costs in society right now. When I talked to Tom and John about this previously, I said, anything we can do to get refunds to people that are struggling. And all kinds,
And that certainly should be part of it, I
Yeah.
think, but the other part of it is, for instance, Jody's idea about matching funds, a matching fund. So for infrastructure or something like that, to give us the opportunity to do that, I mean, we're doubling the money, we're doubling the people's money, or whatever the match is. Maybe it's better than that. You'll find this one better than double. Won't you?
I don't know
I'm
about
sure you
that.
will. But something, so I think you're right. And I think our customers need to know that they benefit from this as well.
Right, and we'll have to also remember, this will have to be focused on electric.
Yes. Because that's
So-
where the money came from.
Right.
Anyway, I'm anxious for us to have our session and talk about those things because a lot of people heard.
John, I didn't know if you wrote down the suggestion that we have some more detail on the resource projects.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll have some, yeah,
Thank you.
have some thoughts on that. We have thoughts around these, but until we
Great.
Okay.
individual items.
I think generally speaking, it's found money. That's how I see it. It's like, wow, unexpected. But how do we leverage it to its highest value and making sure that it has enduring value? That it's not just a one-off, that it really grows the products that the organization can bring to people.
I agree. And another thing that John and I have discussed is thinking ahead to however that this is applied, considering the sustainability of that, because this isn't something that we're going to get year after year. This is unusual. And so considering the kind of the long range plan.
Yeah.
Doesn't Congress actually have the authority they could come in and raid the kitty? The BPA fund? Yeah.
That's an interesting
There's
question.
the debt issue and stuff. I mean, we've always been worried to death about them declaring X and.
Well, I think the key to that is the BPA making sure that they make their treasury payment
Correct.
every year. And that's really where we've been focused on for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But there've been congressmen from different parts of the country that
Well,
have this 25-cent power bills that are.
well, that what
Miraculous.
they're more looking at is why don't you charge market rates?
Changing the preference power.
Yeah, changing it from preference to market,
Yeah.
because we're preference customers. It's not profit.
Jealous of our charges.
I have a vague recollection. I think you mentioned something like this may happen again next year.
There's a potential because how much is
We
left?
couldn't count on it,
Okay,
but
so the RDC was capped at 500 million, but customers have advocated to remove that cap in future years. So that now is not there. The actual net revenues came in at, I think, 860 million.
Wow.
So that above that cap, that 300 and some odd million went into just their cash, their reserves. So that carries forward. And if we have another average or above average water year with favorable market prices, we could see another significant.
we shouldn't plan on it, I
Right.
agree, but it's fine.
I
Yes.
think as the commission thinks about developing decision-making criteria around this so that we establish some protocol so that it helps Jamie go like, oh, well, I could do this all. And we're like, but we like it over here. Like how we would work on, I'm thinking that through sort of at the policy level to help the creative side.
Good idea.
What's been the disconnect rate? We've been going through these
Yeah.
last 2 or 3 months, not much.
What rate?
The disconnect rate. For unpaid bills.
Oh, John, what are we?
Probably about 10 to 12 right now.
So you get 12 people on the power shut off because they're behind and they're paying a bill. That's the kind of stuff that really
Yeah.
worries me. So
Yeah.
they're just so vulnerable families,
Any additional discussion right now?
Thank you.
Thank you. And so now we're going to go a little out of order on our agenda. We're going to skip down to general manager comments.
Okay, so I have a number of them. I'm going to start with maybe Ryan, why don't you come up? So I'll let Ryan explain.
Evening.
Hi, Ryan.
So I'm Ryan Sticka, the water superintendent. So in October, we had a water system survey with the state, so Oregon Health Authority. They do it every 3 years. So basically they go through all your record keeping, your infrastructure, so your reservoirs, treatment plant, all your sampling schedules, make sure everything's up to date on the website through the state. And after, I guess it was a couple of months, we finally got the results from that, which was outstanding performer. So
Excellent.
kudos and recognition to the staff treatment plant, distribution, engineering, all the way, all the way through. All of them did a phenomenal job with preparation to that. And so with getting that outstanding performer, the water system survey doesn't have to happen for another 5 years now. So
Wow,
I
fantastic.
was asked to share that with you guys, and we are
Yes.
we're happy
Thank
to
you.
share that. So
Good.
Great,
Congratulations.
good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please tell your people that.
Thank
we're
you.
Proud of them.
Great.
Okay, so.
James has got bragging rights with his peers now.
yeah.
So there's, we've had an opportunity come up here, and that opportunity is we have had a couple of hot apprentice applicants for linemen apply.
I know, no jokes. Okay.
Not what you're thinking.
It came from Jody.
Like that, okay.
Hot apprentice means they can work on the lines.
Oh,
Not
it's an
Say it's live electricity, live
like
electricity.
electricity, not see, see?
Unjustly accused.
Encouraging that. Yeah. So, which is something that as far as I've known, since I've been here, we've never had that happen.
Wow.
And so, what I was asking for is allowing, the budget to increase by one staff member, so that we could actually, put on an additional apprentice. We have room to, train one more apprentice right now. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, so we actually have 2 line apprentices right now. One is in their 5th step, which is considered hot. They can work on the lines. And
These are almost there to be aligned.
yes, they're 2
7
steps, 7 steps. Yes, there's 2 steps away from, and I think he's going 6th step pretty quick. He'll be in his 6th step here. I think in the next month. So that was the request. We'd like to go ahead and move forward with hiring.
I know I should ask how much it's gonna cost, but pardon me, just want to say, go, get that
Yes.
hot lineman.
Yes.
Do you know-
Yeah,
It's
hot line person.
person, yes. So it's a percentage of the lineman wage.
Okay,
So it's
Is it 5th period or 6th period?
they'll be either 5th, 6th, or 7th. I don't know which
So
one.
they could be upwards of 70 or 80% of it.
Yeah, they'll be more like 85 to 90% of the lineman scale.
So,
You really have to come to us for this? You don't have the authority to do that?
Well, but the reason I'm coming is because it exceeds our budget and staffing.
Okay.
So John, I think you've told us in the past that we've had trouble obtaining and keeping good line crews. And this would be a big step. The person wants to come here.
They want to come here.
We would welcome them,
Train them ourselves and kind of get
no guarantee, but most likely we would have the benefit of this
correct.
line person. Okay.
Yes. And the benefit is that we're training, they want to come here, and it's unusual to have somebody actually that's an apprentice apply at a different organization.
that's great.
And so, and this kind of lightly came up, but the fiscal impact is, it exceeds 10%, I'm assuming, is that the cutoff for coming back for policy?
No,
direction?
the reason I'm coming back is because of the staffing. Our budget is staffed. It's so many personnel in the organization. So we're going above what we've budgeted in personnel by 1, essentially. Impact would probably be somewhere for the remainder of the year is somewhere probably around $100,000. And I actually looked at our budget, and we're actually right now under our budget
By 100,000.
by more than 100,000 actually.
But then you didn't pay very much for power this month. Right?
That's true, but I didn't include that. That was
Okay.
so that was the reason I came back, is because
I would lose that.
Yeah,
Madam Mayor?
definitely.
Please, do you want to be
So moved.
explicit?
That we allow John the ability to acquire this apprentice that he's mentioned to us again.
Do we have to modify the budget, Sam, or?
I think it would be wise to give him a certain a number.
It's part
yes.
of your motion to make all necessary modifications to the budget.
As needed, yes.
Right, you want to give him a high end?
No.
No.
We
Okay.
trust him
Okay.
on this one.
Yeah.
Not to exceed 150,000.
I would,
Well,
it
I'd
would
have
make
to
me
see
feel,
a
it'd make me feel.
Just for sake for John, let's give him a number.
Not to exceed 150. Okay.
For the balance of the fiscal year?
Yes.
Wow, your discretion of what's happening.
Okay, so I have a motion. I'm gonna repeat it to make sure we're clear. We have a motion on the table to allow the general manager to increase staffing by 1 FTE this fiscal year and bring back a revised budget that shows that increase in not to exceed $150,000. That's the motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley, a second from Chair Tankersley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. You have other comments?
I have others.
Okay,
So I just letting the commission know on actually these last three items. I went ahead and declared emergency for some parts for our flocculator for the treatment plant, and I think I mentioned that last month. So those parts are on order. Our radio system, we've had a number of issues with the radio system, so I went ahead and declared emergency on that because not only did our license expire, but we had some failures in the equipment. So we were having trouble even getting quotes from a second vendor. They didn't get back to us, so that was actually budgeted. But I went ahead and declared an emergency to get the procurement going. And then the third item, and this is why I have some
Show and tell.
show and tell items. We our thumper failed. So what's a thumper is going to be the next question. So
I saw that Disney movie. So.
all that. You know that the funny part about that is you're not very far off.
Oh.
It's just that it's not a white tail. So
You too saw the movie.
yes, I did many years ago. So I have gone ahead and declared an emergency, but that was not budgeted, but that is a piece of equipment that we use to locate when underground cable fails. So underground cable failure is where this insulation fails. This is the insulation. And basically the trees in here, and then it blows out the side of the cable when the insulation value gets degrades enough. You come in with the equipment, you actually hook it up. And what happens is when you put a higher voltage on the cable, it actually thumps the ground. So you can actually feel the ground.
That's the location of that.
And that tells you the location of the fault.
And then
So-
it wiggles its nose over.
Well, that's the other part of the, it actually has a radar in it that tells you how far.
So that's what, yeah.
So give us the suspenseful part. How much money?
It's $25,000.
Is that all?
Yeah, but it's 18 to 20 weeks to get one. And
Oh,
they have to
gosh.
package.
Can we borrow one from somebody?
So they're actually sending us a demo. Of the
Oh,
unit,
okay.
The manufacturer, so we're gonna.
Where are we experiencing a bunch of underground failures somewhere?
Typically, underground failures happen certain times of the year based
Yeah.
on moisture content in the water in the
Oh.
soil. So
And when you don't have a thumper.
yes, guess what? Then you're in trouble.
And John, didn't you mention that you're going to try to fix the old ones?
Yes, we're gonna
spare?
we're gonna try and fix the old ones so we have a spare too, so we don't have this happen again. So I just want to let the commission know that was part of our procurement policy that I declared emergency. I let you know what's going on.
Asking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking if you ever talk to a kindergarten class, I'd leave the thumper.
Oh, there you go. Not the hotline.
No, that older classes.
These kids are gonna be so confused.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so
And
that's my comments.
thank you. And then commissioner comments and Chair Tankersley, I think you wanted to start.
Yes, we all got a copy of a letter from Mark Davis, and I know that several of us thought it made a lot of sense and asked staff if there's a way that we can implement this. So Mark, thank you for bringing this to our attention. It's not something that we even thought about, obviously. And so I'm anxious to hear what staff thinks we can do to make this work.
So we've talked about rearranging our agenda. And so a couple things, we could move executive sessions that we know we're gonna have a decision up to the beginning of the meeting. We can adjust the schedule, the way the structure is set up for, make it a little bit more convenient for people to be here when those decisions are made.
How would you do that?
I would look at, basically just taking the schedule and, or the agenda and realigning it, maybe having like so similar to what the city does when we have executive sessions, is putting them at the beginning.
Beginning or end.
Beginning or end, depending on the type of executive session you're gonna have.
So the meeting starts, then we would go into executive session?
So it could have function either way. Either we would, oh, you're just saying, would it be called to order at
Yeah.
5 o'clock?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
That was
Yeah,
another
that's the
question we were
tricky part.
asking, do we move the meeting up earlier, but I know that may conflict with some of the commissioners.
yeah, so the easy thing is to put them at the end, except that doesn't work in the
In
instance when
decision.
we have information that needs to come before the commission for decision. It
Right.
doesn't address the problem of it being an unclear start time on the open part of the meeting if we're putting in the beginning, unless we schedule a half an hour.
Right.
Or some such for executive
And
session.
do better time management in those executive.
so it would look
sessions.
something like the executive session would go 5 to 5:30, the meeting would start at
Right.
5:30.
Well, or we would tell people that executive session ended because the meeting, I think, technically has to start at 5.
Right, so we would,
So we couldn't
Call to
start it
order.
at 5:30?
No, we would-
Change.
We have to
oh,
be,
I see.
yeah.
we'd call to order, we'd go into executive session, but we would be clear up front about the end time of that executive session when we were called to order, and then hold ourselves accountable to leave executive session by that moment in time.
Oh, boy. We like to talk.
Well, to that end, I had sent Sam a note earlier saying, what about starting our meetings earlier? That there were at least 3 people on here that their employment is
Tenuous.
lacking to where they.
Me.
No, 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 no.
Tenuous at
I think
best.
it's a broader, I think that raises a broader point, which is it's not necessarily my ability to adjust my work schedule. It's the idea that these meetings are supposed to be open to the public. And the more you push into a standard workday, the less accessible they are for the public at large.
But if we did it like at 4:30.
And we aren't going to start
meetings
anything
still
other than
start
an
at
executive
5, the
session.
open meeting, right? I mean, can you have the executive session?
That's the idea.
Outside of the meeting.
Mhm.
Start the executive.
Well, you
session.
open the, I think as Commissioner Jarrett said, you open the meeting with the executive session. So you essentially would open the meeting at 4:30. Start the open session at 5 is what you're suggesting.
Is that how the
think.
city
Mm-hmm.
council does it?
We notice them differently. So we notice the executive sessions wherever they're going to be, either on the front end or the back end, but then we start the public meeting at the same time every.
Yeah,
time.
I think we need to, whatever we do, it needs to be the
Well, I
same
think
start time.
Mark's letter talked about the jumping in and out too, is, issue. And I mean, from a housekeeping standpoint, can you read all 3 of the text, so to speak, and deal with all 3 of? 'cause
I think the point is more like if it's a decision-making executive
Yeah,
session,
right.
having it early so that decision-making process can occur in the open session as opposed to having the executive session at the end, then that at 9:30 at night, having to jump back into an open session for a decision. But I mean,
Well, that's what I was thinking about earlier would help. So that's, but anyways.
I'm not sure I answered his question.
I think you did.
Okay.
So I'd like to hear Mark's ideas, further ideas after he's heard our quandary here. Suggestions, Mark?
I mean, I think your discussion is good. I mean, the way I see the city doing it is they announce that they're gonna be meeting ahead of time. And then if it runs over, those of us who are waiting to come in the meeting, they have a separate room, but still, if we're waiting and, it's 10 minutes over, it's not a big deal.
But I don't think
Sometimes
I've
you have
ever let
something
it run
important.
over.
What's that?
I don't allow it to run
Yeah,
over. It is
well,
not.
I'm
have
speaking of
consent.
a previous mayor.
None in this room.
Oh,
Rick Olson.
Okay, so it would make sense to you if whenever we did, we would start the meeting, but it would be within the executive session that had we're gonna make a decision afterwards. So that we would have to come back into session that the public might want to see. We would start with that and then we decide how long that's going to be. And then we would notify people when we expect the next part of the meeting to start, the consent agenda or whatever it is, and then finally, if there is a little, and I know, say the mayor isn't there and I'm running the meeting, okay, and out of control, and so then the executive session goes a little longer. That'd be much better than always having to wait, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think, then you mentioned about didn't we last meeting jump in and out like 3 times?
We did. I mean, another
That
thing,
was what I picked up in the letter, was the jumping in and out, that, you sit out here in the lobby and come back in and back out, I mean.
I think we've allowed ourselves, just because it's convenient for the commission to sort of just jump in and out, have the executive session close in time to wherever the actual action item lands on the agenda. That's for the unit, for the 5 of you, that actually
But we're here serving for the public.
works pretty well.
I
Yeah, it isn't necessarily
appreciate the
customary.
comments and think we should, that's why I sent a note about, let's figure out how to make it happen.
And we could either do it because we almost always have. No, we don't do it. We don't always have executive session that requires action.
Right, most of the time we don't.
So I guess what we could do then, if we, for instance, if we went to the 4:30. We could have the item, we could use that time for, say, Thad's report.
Jody, is 4:30 great for you?
I have a great employer.
Oh, that's right, you've got a different job.
That would be, yeah, I have
Okay.
a different job. Yeah, so I can adjust my schedule.
I have a great boss.
Best one you've ever had.
Good, okay.
And as long as I have the ability to be on Zoom, if I can't leave for some reason, I've got a meeting that goes right up to 4:30. Are we saying that we'll always have a 4:30 executive session, or only if there's a decision?
I mean, my preference would be to see that we put them generally at the end, and
Yeah,
only
I
came
think-
in early if we had something that was tied to decision making.
I think so.
So Mark, do you think that's a problem for the public, that our meetings could be 4:30 or 5?
No, as long as you announce what you're doing, then everybody knows.
Okay.
Whether they're coming down
Yeah,
here.
I like
whether
that.
they're
Okay, I like that.
watching
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
I think Trina got all that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why she won the coconut.
So
Yeah.
it would be really important for me, and maybe your boss too, that we have advance notice if it's starting at 4:30.
Yeah.
So the same way that you just remind us about the meeting every 7 days prior, that would be great.
Okay.
Any additional commissioner comments?
Thank you. Once again, thank you, Mark.
Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. So I have another topic for discussion here. I think Commissioner Gormley, you grumbled earlier that there used to be gruel and now there is no gruel.
Was that a grumble?
Would the commission like to see the dinner aspect of the meeting return to the proceedings?
It isn't necessary. We've really, what happened was we had potluck that was brought in from a couple, 3 different places, what Trina put together. And the staff used to get to be fed first because we'd have an executive session and they go. And so honestly, we'd sit down, 3 or 4 of us, and have dinner afterwards, but
It was just whining when he went.
no, I mean, I was making a joke out of morning. I mean, no, I mean.
Well, it's not the first time I've heard it come up, so I think it's valid to hear if the commission wants
Do
to.
I look like I need another meal?
I am starting by the end of the meeting, I will tell you if I don't, but I usually, when there was meals, I would just go grab something and eat it in the car because I wanted to get home. So I'm fine. I can grumble all the way home.
Well, it also doesn't have to be at the end.
Mm.
But that's part of the
meeting,
public
like the city
record.
eats in advance of the meeting. Right. I mean, you guys eat in advance of the meeting. Or have your
We're
work session.
just bringing back dinner meetings now. So we typically, but we usually have a work session in advance of the council meeting. So it doesn't have that same effect of like, being kind of exclusive and like we're eating here and you're not eating there, which feels awkward. Although as the recent HLC meeting ran into hour 5 of 7 hours and 19 minutes, I did call and ask that food be sent down for the public and staff and the members of that committee as well. So really, it's the commission can do what it wants in terms of this dinner of who it's available to and what time it's eaten, or if it isn't here as a part of it at all. But you know, our meetings straddle
It was
dinner hour.
it was a COVID issue that stopped it because of the community, like communal coffee pots and things like that. We used to have peanuts and M&Ms on the table and stuff. So because of COVID, we stopped all those things.
Well, and it's not just us, it's
Everybody
everybody
has to,
who's working to support the organization. They're all missing their dinners too, so ends up who wants a sandwich.
I was now.
He wants to be,
It might be.
it changed every month, and pizza was probably the most consistent, but we'd have, you know, big table potluck type, not potluck, but
Catered.
you know,
Usually it was always cold by the time.
Yep.
Because it was, you know.
Are you interested in hearing some mixed interest?
Yeah, I think I feel more for the staff. I mean, it's different for me because I'm retired, so I can eat dinner at 4 o'clock and, you know, come to the meeting not starving. But if I've been working all day, I mean, I remember working all day and having meetings till late, and people get hungry. So, I mean, I would like to at least consider maybe having something for the staff that stays for the meetings.
Yeah.
And if council, you know, commissioners want to partake, then have the option.
I mean, I personally, I agree. I'm starving by the end of the meetings, and I think that actually really can affect decision making when you're sitting here and you're kind of like, oh, but my stomach's grumbling. And in the approach that I would prefer also wouldn't be that it was for 3 or 4 people, but it would be for all staff who are going to attend. And, you know, the nature of sandwich and pizzas is, you know, you bring in a few options anyways. And so
that's the way it always had been. It was lots of food, and the staff, there was more staff than the board in those days, so which is fine.
as
With the
you
convenience
use
that
budget
we
dollars for it, so.
Oh, yeah.
So perhaps we could do a little takeaway. Maybe I could talk next week, and Trina and you and I can talk, and we can put some fine detail to it. So bring back dinner for staff, commission, and attending public, assuming they're not here by the hundreds, but you don't tend to get these over here. So
Honestly, Mark has been the Lone Ranger for years. Really, you in the newspaper, and they've long as.
I get a sandwich.
Cookies, don't forget cookies.
I like cookies.
all right, any additional commissioner comments?
Yeah, excuse me. We had a regional water meeting today. Regional water was it 9 or 11 that we started it? Here, 10. So we are now 13 years old.
Oh, 2000. Yeah, it was 10. I don't, it was 10 or 11.
So Kim, Paul started it, and then Kim.
Yeah, I think it was 10 right.
Anyway, so as you well know, Lafayette had been we started out with Dayton, Lafayette, and Carleton being our partners, and it didn't work out for Dayton to stay with us within the first few months they were gone. But ironically today, you know, we're supplying Lafayette's water, and Carleton, we're supplying their water also. So Preston, the manager at water at Lafayette, announced his retirement today.
Right.
And so there's a new manager there and stuff. But anyway, he said to us, please share with your board my appreciation at what you guys did to let Lafayette have such a wonderful water system. And I was really taking what he had to say, because I remember meeting with them and trying to figure out how they keep rats out of their water source, and just, you know, just lots of sad situations with these small towns and stuff. But anyway, it was a great compliment to you to support the work of John and our staff and that. So am I missing anything there, or no? You were anyway.
That's great news. Good.
So the new manager will participate. By the way, our rules are set up. McMinnville chairs the meeting, and I think this next time Carlton's the vice president and Lafayette's the secretary or something. Yeah. So anyway, but just to give you an update on that.
And I'm really glad to hear that. I know our staff did a good job, but it was always the commission's goal, I think, that both sides be better off. And I'm glad that seemed to have worked.
Yeah, it's just, so it's a real positive. Positive thing, I mean, yeah, it just, yeah. And as you know, Carlton continues to try and get their system back in order and stuff, but honestly. I think at some point we will end up being their source too. We have the ability to take care of them and
As,
stuff, so.
as an add-on to that, the Yvette Potter, the mayor of Yam Hill, is sounding the siren bell loudly about the dire straits, their dire water situation. So I think it brings up
And
this really.
we've talked to them before. In fact, we had their guy on, their waterworks guy on, I don't know.
They're talking about going with, direct system?
Yeah.
Hillsborough.
John and I thought we presented.
One of their problems is, and I've been to their meetings, is that they either service 13 or 16 small water districts. And at the expense of the citizens of that city. It's put the citizens in jeopardy because they're selling water. And I've been to meetings where they argued about it at the council table, but if somebody wanted water, and it's just crazy. It's you're taking an urban resource and putting it out in the country. So why would you ever want to have a city? I mean, so it's sad, and that's created all kinds of grief for them, both politically and physically. I mean, they're running out of water. So,
Speaking of executive session.
yeah.
Yes. So any additional commissioner comments?
Thank you.
Has everybody had an opportunity to review the financials? And are there any questions there?
Nope.
Okay, with that, I am not going to adjourn the meeting, but we are going to go into executive session. And the only item we will return for is the adjournment of the meeting.
Okay.
So I believe anybody that does not need to stay on staff side would be free to leave. I mean, I understand that's an administrative directive that I don't have the authority to make, but I was just generally saying that's my observation of the
And so we have Clark on the line.
and should we take a 5-minute break before going into executive session? 2 minutes?
We're human.
Oh, I know.
We'd like to.
It's up.
Just take. a
Mayor
moment.
chairs the meeting. I'm
Well, we all had.
It's like restroom break.
Yeah,
for
so we
everyone.
all just want to say cookie.
sure. Heck, I'm up. for-
Absolutely.
up for a break.
I'm checking to see what my children have
Made you for dinner?
made me for dinner, and it's always a crapshoot.
I'm gonna go
That's
ahead
not
and just
necessarily-
read the citations for executive session, and then we're gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.
So
Oh, good
we'll be
idea.
going into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-6602F to consider information and records that are exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192-355 sub 2-3 relating to identifying security measures, individual building and information processing. Also pursuant to ORS 192-6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions, and pursuant to ORS 192-6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection under ORS 192.355 sub 4 and ORS 192.355 sub 9 relating to confidential or privileged records, and ORS 40.225 attorney-client communications.
And if there's any press in the meeting, which I don't think there are, but if there is any press, press is warned to not share matters discussed in the executive session outside of the meeting. Also, we are not going to come back into open session for any decision. So this will close the open session of the meeting.